Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Committee Room, B 306. Did you know live Senate video is now available at youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia? Senate Committee Room, B 306. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.
Technology Committee. Why doesn't the clerk open the roll in case any members need to be in courts or proxy? Okay,
You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
great. And if anyone wants to text Senators Carol Foy and Eric to let them know that they can proxy in here or proxy out. Okay, so we have a number of bills on today's agenda. The list I have, we're going to take, I have Senator Sturdivant listed as first, but there's a companion bill to one of yours. Do you want to come forward?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Would you like to take up the bill that has the companion first?
No, let's do 1139.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 1139 is one of the three housing-related bills that I have before you this afternoon. I think many of us down here are trying to work on new and creative ways to help deal with the housing crisis that faces everybody across the Commonwealth and around the country, quite frankly. One of the biggest challenges that I have heard from young people is the inability to make a down payment on a new home. They haven't had the time working out of school to be able to build up the savings and the capital to be able to put a down payment on a home and to be able to afford that. And so what my bill does is tries to knit together economic development incentives with the creation of a workforce housing assistance program, which essentially it would create an employer down payment assistance program. When I had originally drafted the bill, I thought that this would be best cited within VEDP. I've since spoken with VEDP, and I think we're talking about whether or not they're the right location to have it or not. And as I mentioned to you today, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to continue working on this and perhaps with the folks at the Housing Commission to help continue to find the right location for this down payment assistance program.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator McPike.
I think the Senator's got a lot of work to do. There are a lot of intricacies to it. It's a topic that I think interests of us all, and I'd move to PBI with letter to the Housing Commission.
Okay, so is there a second to that motion? Okay, so the vote would be to PBI with a letter to the Housing Commission for them to consider the concepts embodied in SB 1139 for review. Unless there's further comments, we will open the roll.
No, 0.
Okay, so that motion is successful and it will be sent to the Housing Commission with a letter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, your other bill, do you have two bills or one other bill?
I have two other bills. 1140, which I think would be a companion rolled into Senator Van Valkenburg's.
Okay, so let's hold on that one for a second.
Yep.
Next, do your third bill was
1452.
number 1452 on certain restrictions on conveyance or assumption. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 1452 deals with assumable mortgages. So right now, it has been the case for a long time that if you have a VA loan, if you have a FHA loan, a USDA loan, those loans are all what are called assumable mortgages. And so when you go, you can have a buyer come in and assume your existing mortgage, which what really means is you can assume their interest rate. And so for many folks who were able to either buy a home or refinance in the last 10 years, and especially during COVID when rates were at historic lows, you've got a lot of people out there who have a 2.75% rate, a 3% rate. And what my bill would do is that if you have a mortgage in Virginia, it would become an assumable mortgage. In other words, you would be able to have your 2% or 2.5%, 2.75% mortgage rate. You could have a buyer come in and assume that mortgage and the remaining debt on that note at your lower rate. And so that helps to deal with the shortage that we have of homes. There's been a lot of good work down here, a lot of leadership on trying to get more shovels in the ground to get more new housing up and built, and to try to deal with the red tape in that process. And all of that has been good, and those are things that have to be done. I think what this helps also address is a more immediate need. You know, even if we get rid of the red tape in the home building process and we get shovels in the ground faster, there's still some period of time before that homeowner is moving into their new house. And so what this bill does is tries to complement that by allowing mortgages to be assumable, so that we don't have the golden handcuffs situation where somebody is in a home with a really low interest rate, and maybe they want to move somewhere else, but they can't because the interest rates are too high to move somewhere else. And so it's really about giving people more freedom of choice in the home buying and home selling process. It's something that already happens every day with VA loans, FHA loans, USDA loans. And so as long as a new buyer is creditworthy, they would be able to assume the existing loan. And so that is the bill, Mr. Chairman. And I have an expert witness here, Mr. Ronak Singh, who is an expert in the area of assumable mortgages, and would appreciate the opportunity to allow him to speak briefly.
Why don't we hear from Mr. Singh before we invite the other folks to come forward? Mr. Singh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sturtevant, and members of the General Assembly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on what I think is a national emergency. I'm the founder of Rome. We are a company that helps buyers purchase homes with the seller's 2 or 3% mortgage included. We can only do this today for the VA and FHA loans. That is less than 15% of homes in Virginia. But in our first year, we have helped homebuyers save more than $500 million in unnecessary interest rate payments. If we had the opportunity to extend this to all loans, Americans would have saved more than $480 billion last year. But Americans everywhere, including in Virginia, have felt this issue acutely. That's why Rome is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, because in Virginia, the typical median family makes about $87,000 a year. With mortgage rates north of 7%, they can only afford a home at $325,000. So that doesn't work because the typical sales price in Virginia is now well north of $400,000. So if we were to give these families access to a 2 or 3% rate mortgage, they would be able to afford homes north of $450,000. This isn't a matter of finances. More than 80,000 Virginians have come to Rome seeking the opportunity to be able to assume more homes, but they cannot. It cuts to the core of who we are. This is about the jobs we don't take, and the families we don't start, and the kids we don't have, because of slight changes to financial instruments outside of our control. Passing legislation to make all loans assumable would offer immediate, meaningful relief. It will save Virginians in 2025 more than $3 billion in unnecessary interest rate payments. That money would be reinvested into your local communities, into your businesses, into the education system, and the infrastructure. We estimate that 400,000 Virginians would be able to afford a home in 2025 if this bill were to pass. And let me emphasize that this is not a permanent disruption. It is a temporary measure to what we believe is a national emergency. This is, I would think of it as just the most pragmatic response we can have to what is going on today. It will take almost certainly a decade for housing starts to come to fruition. There are few levers at our disposal that will be as profound and have as immediate of an impact on the local market. There are going to be some concerns about creditworthiness, particularly from mortgage lenders, but the legislation is crafted to ensure that reasonable eligibility checks, including on defaults and buyer creditworthiness, conform to Fannie and Freddie guidelines. So we found that those who are interested in assuming the mortgage will actually be deemed more creditworthy than the existing borrower. So members of the General Assembly, I urge you, you have the power to alleviate an urgent housing affordability crisis. 400,000 Virginians would be able to afford a home this year if we were to pass this immediately. That would mean more stable neighborhoods, stronger local businesses, and a sense of renewed faith in the American dream. Thank you for your attention and for your willingness to act decisively.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Before we hear from other witnesses, I did have a question. The bill requires that at least one of the people acquiring ownership is determined to be creditworthy under generally accepted mortgage underwriting standards. Does the existing underwriter make that determination, or who's going to make that determination?
Yes, sir. The seller's current mortgage lender would make that determination, and what you'll find is many more buyers can afford to purchase a home when the underlying interest rate is 2% instead of 7%. Thereby, it increases the aperture of buyers who can afford any seller's home, which increases the liquidity in the market and pulls forward sellers. So when people read about the golden handcuffs problem, the reason why they're not listing their home is because few people are going to be able to afford to purchase. And those who can afford to purchase will offer $50K below what the seller wants. If you're able to include your mortgage in that home sale, on average, the typical seller can net $25,000 to $50,000 more, and the typical home buyer saves $1,000 a month over the next 27 years, and their savings will exceed $325,000.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question for this witness. Yes, Senator Williams-Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
The first one is, who's going to pay for the seller's equity loss?
So what happens is, let's say you were to sell your home today for $500,000. The typical home in Virginia, there were about, you can imagine they've got about $400,000 left on their mortgage. So that's $100,000 of equity that seller has. There are two ways that seller's equity gets cashed out. That buyer can make a commensurate payment on the down payment of $100,000, or they can contribute as little as 5% of the purchase price and get a second mortgage that will complete the remaining amount. We have found that if you can put down 5% on a purchase of a home in Virginia, your blended interest rate, when including that second mortgage, is below 5%. That is a 200 to 250 basis points discount to what anyone can access today in the open market.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair? Yes. So you're assuming that someone can afford or qualify for a second mortgage when you said in your description that only one borrower had to qualify. As a real estate broker doing this every day, it is my understanding that when a person goes to purchase, both borrowers have to be credit eligible. Both borrowers have to have the proper debt to income ratio. And both borrowers, if they are going on the loan as a person responsible for payment, both of them have to be able to qualify. So if in your scenario, only one person has to qualify, and now you're asking that person to take out a second mortgage to cover the equity, that's overburdening that borrower. And I mean, when we start talking about first-time homebuyers, I don't know many of them that have $150,000 or $200,000 just sitting around. I mean, they could buy with 3.5% down on an FHA. And if they got a little extra money, they can buy down the points.
Thank you, Senator. So this is actually, to your latter point, this is a free buy down service that every seller can ask for. The most common request that sellers are getting today in Virginia is a request to offer concessions in the form of a buy down for a home buyer. You can think of this as every seller has the opportunity to give a free buy down. Now, to your former point around having two borrowers, it is not atypical compared to any other home purchase situation. If a borrower wishes to assume in their name only, they're able to do that. If they would like to add an additional borrower, they're able to do that. The system simply works around the constraints that borrower has. So if they'd like to put down the full amount of equity, that's fine. If not, we would work with them even if they could put down as little as 5%. So on a $500,000 purchase price, as long as you can put down $25,000, you can get a blended mortgage rate below 5% in Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Sounds a
you.
little
We've got
shady to
in the
me.
queue Senator French and Senator McPike, and I do want to hear other witnesses too. Senator French? Please.
Microphone. I'm thinking about a scenario. I don't know if I can ask the question the way I'm thinking. So I have two homes in the same subdivision, basically identical. One of them has a good rate. One of them has a current or near current rate. Aren't we creating a system where we're going to make this good rate easier to sell than this rate here, even though they may appraise at the same thing?
60% of all U.S. residential real estate debt was originated in 20 and 21. That is $9 trillion worth of mortgages that are out there. The entire U.S. real estate market is $20 trillion. So a larger proportion of homes than you might imagine have this opportunity. What that enables is for every homeowner to differentiate their listing and actually get their equity and get liquidity. One of the reasons why people are unable to move today is because they're unable to sell their home at a price that would satisfy their needs. This allows them to get that liquidity. And one of the reasons why you find that housing affordability is a securities problem is because when sellers don't list because they can't think that they'll be able to meet their sales price, the homes that are on the market are in tight supply. That creates upward pricing pressure on those homes, thereby reducing the number of demand that you will see from home buyers who wish to purchase. This increases the supply because sellers can actually sell faster and they might be able to fetch a higher sales price. In turn, that creates downward pricing pressure on those homes and allows for buyers to benefit not only from the interest rate subsidy, but also from the purchase price.
Yes, Senator French.
Yep. Well, I think less than 2% of homes have a mortgage rate above 6.5%. So the proportion of homes you're thinking about is quite de minimis. What I would think about it as is sellers need a tool and an outlet in which they can actually dispose of their asset. This enables them to access that. I think there will be some competition, but it is no different than what you see today. Every home buyer at this point is required to take on a 7% plus mortgage. This simply gives the option for other home buyers to purchase a home with a 2 or 3% mortgage, which is not possible today in any other format.
We have in the queue, we've got Senator McPike and then Van Valkenburg, and then I'm going to hear from other witnesses. Senator McPike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I guess my question is, how many, if this is to go in effect, how many 2% mortgages would this impact, given that my assumption would be that this is already in contract, right, within a mortgage or a deed, and therefore really wouldn't apply to any of the examples you've given this committee?
Are you asking how many homes would be eligible for this?
Or 2% interest rate, because it's already under contract, and the General Assembly does not have any ability to interfere with contracts that are existing today.
Yeah, so it would impact in Virginia, I believe, about 450,000 homes.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McPike.
I guess to clarify, my question is, if you have an existing mortgage or deed that has no provision for assumption or conveyance, there's no ability for this law to change that.
Well, I don't think you need to change the law, actually. You just need to not enforce a particular aspect of it. You can think of it as... one way you can think of this is racial covenants were thought of in the same way. For a long time, you were actually not permitted to be able to sell your home to people of varying degrees of religion and race.
Just to put a fine point on the senator's question and your answer, are you saying that if someone enters into an existing contract that does not have an assumability clause or provision, that if we pass this, that we would change that existing contract to allow it to become assumable? Is that what you're asking?
Mr. Chairman, that is the policy change that this bill seeks to do.
With existing contracts? Okay.
Indeed.
It's not just prospective going forward?
Correct. It would be retroactive as well. So it is not an insignificant policy change, admittedly.
Yes. Okay.
But I would say, in regard to what Mr. Singh was just mentioning, there have been contracts in the past, especially in Virginia, where a community would have said you can't sell your home to a person of a certain race. And we have appropriately said you can't do that. This is obviously a different context, but in the sense that we have said who you can and can't sell or who you must sell to is something that we have made a policy decision about appropriately in the past.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn to Senator Okay, let's save that and hear from the witnesses, because I know that this might be the one issue that we've got the bankers and the credit unions on the same page, or at least from what they told my office, if I got it right. So I want to call them forward to comment on any issues they have with this bill.
Support the bill, please raise your hand.
Anyone who differs from this bill or is opposed, come into the queue up front, and we'll take your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Matt Breen with the Virginia Bankers Association. Y'all have touched on most of what I was going to say, but while we certainly appreciate, proposals to, increase housing, spur the housing market, that we do oppose this approach. When lenders make a home loan, they undertake substantial underwriting and assess the risk of the borrower they are taking on. This bill would undermine that risk-based approach, forcing a lender or mortgage servicer to take on a borrower regardless of if they fit into the specific institution's underwriting standards, not just the vague, undefined reference to the industry underwriting standards that don't exist. We also are concerned about the negative consequences and potential conflicts with existing anti-discrimination and fair housing and lending laws. And finally, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae support around 70% of the mortgages market in the U.S. Conventional loans like these covered in the bill are not allowed to be assumable by these entities. They must, they only, as was mentioned, there's always a non-transferable, non-assumable clause in the existing contracts, which this would absolutely negate. So for those reasons, and joined by the Virginia Mortgage Bankers Association, we oppose the bill.
Hi, welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is C.J. Vatipelson with the Virginia Credit Union Association. Much like the comments of Matt, as well as others on in the committee, we do stand opposed to this legislation. We believe this will hurt credit unions' ability to properly manage risk, both credit risk as well as interest rate risk, with potential conflicts with federal regulations, including our field of memberships. To put a little credit union spin to it, as you probably all know, credit unions have certain field of memberships who we can and cannot serve, and then making any mortgage that we hold assumable by anyone who is deemed under the vague term of creditworthy could very likely fall in conflict with them being out of our field of membership and us truly not being able to serve them based on the credit union model and principle. So for that reason and many others, we ask that you oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Okay, and if I could ask you one question, anyone can answer it, but if you, maybe you can. Do you see anything in this bill that would compensate the existing mortgage lender for the work they would take in underwriting to evaluate the prospective additional buyer to the existing loan? Okay.
No, in agreement with the bankers, we have not seen any of that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any others who had a differing view who wanted to speak, or anyone else who's for this? Anyone on the line? We've got someone on the line to speak. Why don't we give them 1 minute if their camera is on?
Mr. Mike Pruitt, you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Mike Pruitt. I'm an attorney with Housing Opportunities Made Equal. I also am a supervisor representing Albemarle County, Virginia. My community is one that is remarkably expensive and remarkably wealthy. People who are growing up and coming of age as residents in my community struggle to access a really competitive and tight housing market in Albemarle County. And this bill makes a small but important step toward helping alleviate those struggles that are facing younger members of my community and people who are trying to access the opportunity that we offer. So I respectfully urge this committee to support the bill.
Thank you. Okay. Are there members of the committee with any other questions or comments before we proceed to take motions?
I have a motion at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair.
Senator,
Mr. Chair, just a comment for the millennials and Gen Zs out there that think you'll never be able to afford to buy a house because interest rates are so high. Just to understand that when my wife and I qualified for our first home mortgage, granted 36 years ago, we were thrilled that we waited long enough for interest rates to drop so we could lock in at 10%. So it's not so bad today. You can do it, okay? So I'll wait for Senator Angela Graves' motion. So, I mean.
Thank you, Senator Head. Okay, Senator Williams-Graves, you had a motion?
Yes, I move that we PBI this bill.
Okay, there was a motion, a second to PBI the bill.
Last word.
If you have briefly, sure.
Just very briefly. Mr. Chairman, the language for this bill comes from the HUD statute. This is something that we already do every day. Our lenders do every day with VA loans and FHA loans. This is not a new and novel area in terms of the concept. It is would be a new policy change with regard to doing it retroactive, not just prospective. But when we have a housing crisis like we have now, and the fact that housing starts will not bring new homes online for years, this is an opportunity to address the issue in the immediate term. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we had a motion and a second, and the motion was to PBI the bill. We'll go ahead and vote on the board.
Ayes 14, no 0.
Okay, the bill fails to report. Thank you for bringing this to us. We had. Are you able to? We have the other. What was the other one?
1140.
Do you want your bill, your other bill? Do you want to have that rolled into Senator von Valkenburg's bill?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would move that Senate Bill 1140 be incorporated into Senate Bill 1424.
May
So that was moved and seconded.
And Chief Poacher, Chief Cow.
Okay. So all in favor of that will say aye? Or do we have to record that vote? I'm sorry. Okay, those bills are now merged, and I was going to wait to take it up for a bit till we get through some of this queue. Just so that people are aware, on deck we've got first will be Senator DeSteph, then Senator Stanley, McDougall, Srinivasan, Perry, and others who I can't see because the list is a little longer. So Senator DeSteph.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for having me. We have Senate Bill 1468. And the purpose of Senate Bill 1468 is to safeguard land adjacent to our military bases in Virginia by requiring compliance with the federal regulations before any transfer of ownership or interest. Primary mechanism for this enforcement. Oh, we have a substitute. Sorry.
All in favor will say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, the substitute's before us, and that's what you're going to explain to us on 1468.
And to continue, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the primary mechanism for this is having it go through the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States review, which is set forth in 50 U.S. Code 4565 prior to the land acquisition. The mandatory compliance with this for our foreign adversaries will help ensure compliance with the CFRS program.
There are exemptions, so if one of our foreign adversaries holds interest in the land prior to January 1st, 2026, they'll be exempt. And this will ensure compliance with our U.S. treaties, strengthens our national securities, which requires a federal level review to prevent foreign adversaries. It also promotes transparency and safeguards our local communities of interest from economic development. On a lot of our military bases, there's a substantial amount of economic development happening today, and both, as an example, in Senator Locke's district and in my district, two of our bases have in the billions of dollars of economic development happening today and over the next 5 years. So this aligns the state with federal strategies and harmonizes Virginia law with established federal protocols, reducing the security vulnerabilities. Now, we've worked with both the realtors and the title folks on this. Our title attorneys are happy with the substitute. Our realtors, they'll probably oppose this lightly because it does delay the transfer of land or property because it requires it to go to through the CFIRS process first if the sale is being made to a foreign adversary. There is no liability back on our realtors. This ensures that there's no reliability or liability or blowback on our realtors or our title clerks. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer questions on Senate Bill 1468.
Sure. I don't have 50 U.S. Code 40, Section 4565 in front of me. Do you want to just briefly tell us exactly who couldn't?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, what that is it's a review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. So if one of our foreign adversaries, an example is, let's say the Chinese government or Russian government would like to purchase land that adjoins Langley Air Force Base. Before that's allowed, they would have to get a review by the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States process, which truly takes between 60 and 90 days. Once that ruling comes out, they would approve, yes, it's okay, or no, it's not. And that's kind of what it's for.
Thank you. Okay, are there those in the audience who wanted to speak in support of this legislation?
Those online who wish to support, please raise your hand.
Or anyone online? Okay. Anyone who would like to take another view or oppose this legislation?
Those online who oppose the bill, please raise your hand.
I'm sorry, Aaron, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Erin Corman with the Realtors. We have spoken to the senator. We do have concerns about this bill. This bill has come up in various forms over the past few years. We are concerned about the potential for liability. Don't know whose obligation it is to determine whether this is a foreign adversary that's trying to purchase the property. As realtors and even as sellers, we cannot ask anybody about their nationality, their racial background, their national origin, and so we have a lot of concerns about the potential for liability and whose obligation it is to determine that this person is a foreign adversary, and for those reasons, we do oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there members of the committee with questions or comments? Senator Van Valkenburg.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, maybe this is for staff. So does I'm looking at the U.S. code that it references. So does this already happen? Meaning, does the federal government already look at all land that's being bought and sold adjacent to a military base in the Commonwealth?
I'm happy to answer that, Mr. Chair. It only looks at it if it's given a heads up from A, the military base when they find out that it's happening, or B, if and on one of them that just happened, realtor brought it up and said, hey, I believe that this individual is this, and they actually brought it up and it went through the CFIRS process.
but this was brought up by one of our local realtors in Hampton Roads.
Follow-up question.
Yes, Senator Van Valkenburg.
Would the process that you just described be any different at the state level?
What this would do is, no, it would actually require that the property that's adjoining a military base go through the CIFRS process. And that, again, that process is very, very quick if it's one of our friendlies. If it's not one of our friendlies, then it's 60 to 90 days before you get a ruling out.
Last follow-up question.
Yes, Senator Van Valkenburg.
So the federal government doesn't require them to go through this process right now? But so what I'm hearing you say is that the federal government doesn't require that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Senator Van Valkenburg, it does not, and the only place in Virginia where this has to go through is with adjoining to farmland, and that was a bill we went through last year.
Any other questions or, yes, Senator Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for patron. So a question for patron on this one is, we have a rather unique situation in the eastern part of Prince William. I represent the western part, but where we have most people know about Quantico Marine Corps Base. What not everyone knows is that there's actually a regular old town, the town of Quantico, that's actually within the Marine Corps Base. And it is not part of the base, but you have to still go through the base in order to get to it. And so the question I have on here is, like, let's say if you were going to purchase land on 3rd Avenue, 4th Avenue, 2nd Avenue, these are not necessarily the homes in and of itself that directly adjoin the base, but they are entirely enclosed by it. Would this bill only affect affect property that is up to the literal actual boundary line of the Marine Corps base, or would this affect anything else that's actually in the town of Quantico itself?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rome, if I may, it's only property that's adjoining the military base. So in the case of Quantico, it'd be only the land that adjoins the perimeter of that. If it was in the middle of Quantico proper itself, then that would not go through the CIFRS process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I guess we can take motions unless there's further discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Senator McPike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just to quickly touch base to Senator Rome's question, actually, you couldn't actually get to your property if you're a foreign entity because you have to have an ID to get to the town. I couldn't even access my constituents in my town until I got proper military credentials. But that's a side note of an isolated town that is purely cut off from the entire world. In this case, I have kind of concern about having and usurping federal authority. When this came up last time, and last year, we touched base with DOD officials and the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce has an entire division that focuses on this issue. They have a lot more information that's pertinent and relevant, and both DOD, who have assignments to this, as well as Commerce, who look at this, and I have concern of anything that interferes, usurps federal authority in this regard. They have a lot more information that's more pertinent to what the Commonwealth would have, and I would move to PBI.
Okay, there was a motion and a second. Unless there are further motions or discussion, we can...
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please wrap up. Yeah.
Senator McPike, this doesn't usurp federal law. This actually invokes federal law. So it says it has to go through the CIFRS process if these conditions exist. It doesn't bypass anything.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator McPike.
It creates a private right of action to file a lawsuit using the same code section under federal law. Just to be clear, that is not what the patron is indicated. Under Section C, you now are creating action to a circuit court of which parties don't have any actual intel or information in relation to the federal code section he's referencing.
We've got a motion and a second. The bill's been discussed, so we will vote on the motion on SB 1468, and the motion was to PBI.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Senator DeStef. Okay, in our queue, we've got Senator Stanley, McDougall, Srinivasan, Perry, and Salim. Is Senator Stanley in the room? Okay, we'll next go to Senator, it looks like Senator Srinivasan And tell me, make me pronounce it right, Srinivasan? Okay. Thank you. Please come forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a substitute and concept that I would like to handle.
The substitute, oh, is it for distribution? Okay. There was a motion to, I think that,
Mr. Chairman, this is a substitute that has not been thoroughly reviewed by DLS, and we haven't been able to make sure we've gotten all the different cross-references. So this is, in concept, it might look differently once we get all the pieces into the actual substitute.
And are there multiple copies of that? Why don't we distribute that and explain what you were,
yes,
what your intent is at least?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest, statement of economic interest, Mr. Chairman. So the substitute is a straightforward transparency measure aimed at improving the filing and publication of the timeline of the SOEI, the Statement of Economic Interest forms, for the 140 General Assembly members, as well as Governor, Lieutenant Governor, and the Attorney General. The bill accelerates the filing deadline for these officials to December 15th, rather than February 1st, which is the current deadline, and requires the Virginia Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council to make the disclosures public within 30 days, rather than the current 6 weeks timeframe. All other positions in the Commonwealth are required to submit. The SOEI would maintain their existing filing deadline. The goal of this change is to enhance transparency by ensuring that potential conflict of interest are disclosed in a timely manner before the start of our legislative session. Under the current schedule, Mr. Chairman, SOEI disclosures are not available until mid-March, even though we file them on February 1st. This bill would shift the timeline to make disclosures public by January 15th, aligning them more closely with the beginning of our session. Last year, I secured funding through a budget amendment to add an additional attorney within the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council, ensuring that the council has the necessary support to carry out its duties, including reviewing disclosure forms, processing reports, and conducting training. SB 1349 has no financial impact, and I believe the council's current staffing can absorb the additional workload. Thank you again for your consideration.
Okay, I think I think your presentation provoked questions from some of the members of the panel about why we're shifting it. You want it to be on December 15th rather than
February 1st.
February 1st, so before the General Assembly session, and it would be available within a month. There's forms that are largely followed online. Is Mr. Petto from the conflicts? Please come forward. I don't know if you've had a chance to review his concept, the change. Is that something what would be involved to change this?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Stuart Petto, Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council. We do have currently, thanks to the additional staff that we got this year, we are able to handle this. Basically, the choice in terms of operational is if you have, currently all forms are released essentially at the same time. For January 1, February 1 is the deadline. Operationally, if everyone in the Commonwealth is changed, so that's roughly 10,000 people, there's no fiscal impact in terms of having to do any programming. We just simply change the date on our system. If you start having some forms released earlier and others later, it is my understanding that there will be some operational programming that will be needed to make it possible. It could be done, but we will have to create sort of a separate back end so that some forms are released basically November 1, and then others are released on January 1.
Okay, and do we know roughly how much that kind of patch might cost?
Very roughly, I did look into this. It's sort of a large range because I didn't want to get logged down for attempting a contract that work is coming, but it would probably be somewhere between $8,000 to $40,000.
Okay.
So in that range, and probably about 15 to 20.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the senator or for Mr. Petto?
I do, sir.
Senator McPike.
Thank you. So what happens in a case under Form C that I buy a stock on December 16th?
That's a very good question, Senator. Under current the instructions. That schedule, Schedule C, is one of the ones that we call a snapshot in time, so it's supposed to be accurate as of the day you file. So if you file on December 15th and you buy on December 16th, that doesn't change any reporting requirements. You do not need to amend your form. Of course, the council always tells people, please be honest, do not play games with this, but it's simply the current rules now, which is you file your schedule as of the day it's submitted.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman.
Senator McPike.
So in the effort to be transparent for the session, and that's really what the intent is to expose member stocks if there's apparent conflicts of interest in theory, right?
That's correct, Senator.
And so if I were to buy stocks on December 16th versus the 15th, it really wouldn't be transparent to the public of bills I'm voting on during that session.
That is correct, Senator, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Senator McPike. Okay, are there other questions for the senator or comments from members of the panel?
Mr. Chairman, can I make one comment?
Sure.
Thank you. To Senator McPike's question, the intent of why I brought this last year and this year is when we file the statements right now on February 1st, it's 1 year backwards. Just think about it. The Senator McPike is absolutely right. When you file it on 15th, if you buy something on 16th, of course, it won't be current. But the way it is currently now, it's 1 year. And that's what I was trying to change. Because what is public when we gavel in is last year's statement. And nobody would see our current years until mid-March. This would enable that would be seen by January 15th.
And is this something that you had noticed, or have you gotten complaints from the public or constituents on this one?
This is something that Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. This is something that I had designed last year when I was looking at how can we make it more transparent. And I met with Mr. Stewart. I had a long conversation. And then that is why we exempted all the state employees, because that would be an undue burden. And then in our discussions, we also decided to include the governor, the statewide offices. And then I had extensive discussions on the House side with their teams. And that's why I recommended the budget amendment, and I was able to secure the budget amendment last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Van Valkenburg.
Yeah, maybe this is for Stuart. So would it be accurate to say that when we're thinking about how to vote this bill, we're really thinking about a trade-off? So the trade-off being, if we adopted the policy, people would be able to see on the front end of session everything that's happened to that legislator in the last year, when people are maybe most paying attention. But the trade-off is, if there's last-minute financial dealings that could impact how people think about the session, we wouldn't know that for another year after the policy already went into effect. And so we are trading kind of one, I guess what I'm saying is we're trading kind of one form of transparency for another form of transparency, and it's which one we think is most important is how we should vote.
That's correct, Senator. It really is a question of which form you think is more important. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I should also state that the Ethics Council has not formally reviewed this, so we do not have an official position on this bill.
Thank you. Okay. Were there, for Senator Williams-Graves?
Thank you. So if we left the date, Mr. Chair Stewart, at December 31st and kept the 30 days shall be made public no later than 30 days after the filing deadline, because even if we make this December 15th, we start session the second Wednesday of January, come hell or high water, or no water. We start. Okay. So would it matter if we were 15 more days in, if we kept the filing, if the filing date was December, the end of business date was December 30th, and then you all had 30 days instead of 6 weeks? Would that work to make 30 days to make it public after the December 31 date? I mean,
Senator, is your question simply the publication date, moving it from 42 to 30?
yes.
Certainly that is possible. We as staff could do it. There is one thing for the members of the committee to consider, though, which is it is amazing the number of requests that we get for amendments prior to publication during that 6-week period, quite a bit. And many people have come to sort of rely on the fact that, for example, for members of the General Assembly, by statute, we review the forms confidentially and let them know if changes need to be made. Also throughout the state, a huge number of the other 8,000 filers will contact us. I forgot to include this, I forgot to include that. So certainly the publication date can be pressed up from 42 to 30. That might inconvenience a number of filers who's like, oh, I wanted to make a correction, I did not have the chance to do it before it got published. So that's another thing for the committee to consider.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator McPike, do you have a question? Or yeah, let's take testimony. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak for this bill?
Those
or
online, please raise your hand.
Anyone opposed to this legislation want to come forward?
Those online opposed, please raise your hand.
Mr. Chair.
Sarah McPike.
I appreciate what the senator's trying to do. I think there's another layer of complexity. We also have at the same time local government employees that have to file at the same time, roughly at the same time. We also have federal government employees that also have to file at the same time. And if you have a family member of any one of those, all of those interests also have to be coordinated at the same time and appear on each other's reports. And so I would be really hesitant to align different times based on different filings for the parties. If you have a spouse or child who also works, they also have to report. There's a layer of complexity that cross not just the General Assembly, but federal, local workers as well. And I'd move that we gently PBI the good senator's work to increase transparency, but it does have a level of complexity that may make life more difficult. And as Senator Van Valkenburg said, it's a trade-off in where that transparency happens. And I think for compliance purposes, I think for everyone's sake, it might be easier to keep it where it is. So I move the PBI.
So there was a motion and a second to PBI the bill. Unless there's further discussion, we will vote.
Ayes 14, noes 1.
Thank you, Chairman, Committee.
Thank you, Senator. Okay. Senator McDougal is in the room now. And Senator McDougal, I didn't see you in the queue. Did you sign up as well? You have got a bill here? I believe so. We'll take you after Senator McDougal.
Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 769. And Mr. Chairman, there is a substitute I asked to be prepared, and this came from some of our friends in the tech world, and would ask if the committee would consider adopting that substitute.
The substitute.
Okay, there's a motion, a second, to adopt the substitute for SB 769. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the substitute's before us, and Senator McDougal, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, this is a bill they carried last year. I think it was at JCOTS over the summer. It's one that I think is pretty important as we look at where we're receiving our information. One of the things that is very clear is that when you go to somewhere on the internet, somebody collects information about you. They might not necessarily be thinking it's Senator Eben or Senator Reeves, but they know it about you and your device, and they're using that to sell to other places. And that's why you get lots of information coming back to you about things you might have looked at or areas you might be of interest. My objective is to try to give people the opportunity to opt out of that, to make the decision that just because you go somewhere or visit a site does not mean you're getting information back. I've had lots of communication from people in the industry that are not necessarily as excited about you being able to opt out and protect your information from being received or used in sales. I did, though, have, and I want to give a shout out to Google. They sat down, we had some conversations. They came up with this language, and I wanted to have it before the committee But candidly, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we're ready to move because this is a lot of language. We're in a short session. I want to get it done quickly, but I want to get it done right. So I'm going to ask that the committee take the bill by for the day, but I wanted this to be the amendment that's on the bill so that everybody continues to look at it, that this will be the starting point for where we have a conversation next session in a long session as opposed to somewhere else.
Thank you, Senator. Before we entertain your motion, I just want to make it clear that members of the public that want to review the substitute that Senator McDougal presented to the committee will be online as Senate Bill 769. And then we're going to entertain a motion for it to go by for the day.
So moved.
Senator Van Valkenburg wants to just go ahead and pass it, but
okay. Okay.
Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Reeves.
I just have a quick question. Do you know how much these companies make on selling our information, or is there any data available like that you can get or they'll voluntarily give to you?
Mr. Chairman, there might be information, somebody might know that, and you might be able to tap that into an AI device and come up with an answer. But I don't know specifically, but I will tell you that some of the largest corporations, not just in the United States, but in the world, are ones that obtain this data, like Google and Microsoft and Meta. That doesn't make them bad. It just means that they are collecting this information and using it. And candidly, we all use it politically. I mean, when we go out and have campaigns, we are paying somebody to get digital information out in a certain manner. So whether you're in business or political, whatever direction, it is the information that is being used by everybody right now. And every device you have has an individual ID on it that every time you go somewhere, that ID says, hey, I'm Bryce Reeves' device. Here I am. Send me something because this is information I'm looking at.
We're spending a little bit of time on a bill that's going to go by, but I'm going to go to Senator Van Valkenburg.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I wasn't really joking. I mean, this isn't that many words. This is something that's already being done in other places. I also don't want to give the fine senator more work than he wants. But I guess I have a question. Is there a House patron for this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I'd answer the senator, not that I'm aware of. Candidly, this was something because looking at what was occurring in other places is the reason I came up with this. I have not talked to any of our House friends.
So follow up, Mr. Chair.
Senator Van Valkenburg, yes.
Would the senator be opposed to running it through, and then the House takes a crack at it too? That's more work for you, which is why I ask. I don't see why we wouldn't just pass this, but I am also only one person on this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd say
Go ahead.
I'm at the will at the committee, as always.
Okay, and just as a clarification for Senator Reeves, this is about targeted advertising. It's not so much about sale of data, but retaining the data for targeting, right?
Mr. Chairman, the way it works is you get the data targeted, and that's what you're selling is access to being able to target those items. So I don't think it's as much that you're selling. You're not saying here's a packet of data we're selling. You're saying we will provide the service that will target all your ads. If you want to put something online, we're going to make sure that they go to everybody that's wearing a purple tie that's looked at this website and this age bracket within this time frame.
Mr. Chairman.
Move to report.
And then we're going to go to Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a pretty long docket.
We do.
The patron asked for it to go by.
And we
It was
have a
properly
motion and a second.
And we're still discussing.
Okay, so that is an excellent point. So let's just vote on the motion, which was to take by for the day. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. The bill goes by for the day.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator.
Chairman.
Okay.
Members of the committee.
Okay, Senator Suderline.
Come on up. I don't think we've passed a bill yet. Senator Suderline, just warning you. Just kidding. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the committee for your attention on Senate Bill 783. Senate Bill 783 does two fundamental things. First, it says that a child, for purposes of internet privacy, is someone that's younger than 18 years old. And secondly, it then says anyone that's a child, their information cannot be collected, used, or disclosed, their personal data from their internet usage, unless there's parental consent given. And it provides parental consent can be provided either through a signed consent form to the controller or processor of this information, using a credit card, debit card, or other online payment system that provides notification of the transaction and to the primary account holder, or three, providing any valid government-issued ID to the controller or processor. So a few things to be very clear. This does not prevent folks from under the age of 18 using social media. I had some people that hoped it did that. That's not what it does. It just says that internet companies cannot take young people's data without their parental permission and then relentlessly market at them like we know happens so much right now. I think this is incredibly important. There's no way we'd allow a store owner to follow a young person through their store, see what they look at, and then shout at them for the next several weeks about when they were looking at diet information about why they need to buy these products. And that's what's happening to our young people. It's especially destructive, and I think that we need to do this. I hope there's bipartisan support for it. This is something that previously passed the other chamber on a strong bipartisan vote. And also it's something that New York State has also passed since last year when I presented this. So in the years since, it's gotten significant bipartisan support just a little further north of us. I think it's incredibly important that we make it clear that someone that's under 18 is a child. You can't get a driver's license in Virginia if you're under 18 if you don't have parental permission. You can't purchase alcohol, tobacco unless you're 21 years old. There's no reason we should say that a 14 should not get the protections of a child when they're on the internet. So I hope it will be your pleasure to pass the bill.
Okay, so Senator Suderline, if I understand this correctly, it would prevent a 17-year-old college freshman from registering with the product or service if they collect the data. So if you want to join a pizza loyalty club or register, you'd have to get your parental permission first. Is that right?
What it would not allow is for the company. It's not a prohibition on the people under 18. It's a prohibition on the companies, the for-profit companies, using these kids' data and if they're under 18. That's where it's at.
Okay,
In the same way, we do not let a 17-year-old college freshman get a driver's license if their parents have not authorized it, nor would we allow them to be married under Virginia law as well.
So if this poor 17-year-old freshman who can't get a driver's license needs a pizza and they want to order it from on a website for some pizza chain that collects their data, that would be a violation if they collect the data and send them a follow-up email if they want to join their buy one, get one free club or whatever, emergency pizza club, I don't know.
No, I don't think so, because unless the 17-year-old is different than almost anyone else I know, I would imagine the credit card is also attached to the primary user being their parent, and their parent getting the notification of this would give the consent for it. That's
Okay.
where you have the credit card or debit card information
Thank
included.
you. Senator Rome has a question, then we're going to take testimony.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for the patron. So when the patron and I actually talked about the bill over the phone prior to the start of session, we had gone back and forth and basically making sure that this wasn't going to be a content restriction bill. This was strictly about for-profit companies, more or less tracking kids. And that this is only going to be applying to making sure that the companies themselves are not taking data from children and selling that data, or taking that data and targeting those kids to have blast advertisement, blast advertisement, blast advertisement. But if that kid wants to read the news, wants to read specialty news, anything like that. They're not going to be impacted from that. Can the senator, number one, just confirm that everything I said is correct? And then number two, just kind of elaborate on that idea of making sure that this isn't about censorship. This is about making sure that you don't have kids being targeted.
Yes, thank you, Senator Rome. Mr. Chairman, I tell Senator Rome that, yes, it is not any sort of content bias at all. And I appreciate that question, appreciate the conversation in between the sessions about the bill.
Okay, are there those in the room who are opposing this legislation or have issues with it, would like to come forward?
Who opposed the bill, please raise your hand.
Okay, anyone from the tech community or otherwise come forward?
Good afternoon, Chairman and esteemed committee members. My name is Hope Ledford, and I'm with Chamber of Progress in respectful opposition to SB 783. Chamber of Progress is a tech industry coalition advocating for the progressive future for tech and inclusive access to that future. Our partners include innovators like Apple and Google, but they do not have a vote or veto over our positions. One of our top priorities is making the internet safe for young people. However, we believe this bill would threaten the privacy of all users and disproportionately harm Virginia's vulnerable youth. This bill requires platforms to obtain verifiable parental consent for minors to access an array of online services and resources. Consent laws, while aimed at protecting youth, can be harmful, particularly in cases of parental conflict or abuse, especially for the 62% of Virginian LGBTQ+ youth who do not live in a safe and affirming households. Online spaces and resources provide critical support. So we are concerned that this could be weaponized by anti-LGBTQ+ guardians, in particular, to prevent LGBTQ+ youth from accessing community, resources, and safe spaces online. Secondly, verifiable parental consent threatens privacy by forcing platforms to collect age data from all users, which risks cybersecurity breaches that disproportionately harm LGBTQ+ youth who already face significant harassment and threats offline. Chamber of Progress supports privacy protections for consumers that clarify their rights and make clear the obligations for data processors and controllers. We commend Virginia legislators for their balanced approach to data privacy, which has set a model for other states. However, the only way to achieve verifiable parental consent is by identifying all users of all ages, which raises significant privacy issues. Please oppose SB 783 and support the Commonwealth's most vulnerable kids who use online spaces as a source of information, resources, community, and lifeline.
Mr. Chairman.
Why don't we hear from all the witnesses, then we'll come back. If you could bring in the front questions, if that's okay.
Good afternoon, Chair Eben and members of the committee. My name is Margaret Durkin, and I'm the Mid-Atlantic Executive Director for TechNet, a technology trade association. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak today on Senate Bill 783. TechNet is committed to providing a safe, age-appropriate experience for young people online. However, we are concerned about this bill for several reasons. Virginia passed a comprehensive data privacy law that already provides several rights for teens, including the opportunity to opt out of targeted advertising, sale of data, and profiling in furtherance of decisions that produce legal or similar results. This bill will lead to more data collection because one would have to get the information of a parent as well, which goes against data minimization standards. And it also assumes in this bill that one size fits all for kids, and a 14-year-old is not necessarily at the same developmental stage as a 17-year-old. And we would suggest that the committee build on the state's foundational privacy law and pass this bill by, and to the example regarding the 17-year-old joining the Pizza Loyalty Rewards program, not all 17-year-olds who are in college might necessarily have access to a parent's credit card. So I did want to note that. And for these reasons, we are opposed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Elizabeth Rafferty here on behalf of the Northern Virginia Technology Council, and we align our comments with those previously. While privacy and online safety of children should be protected, the bill is going to put more Virginians' personal data at risk, and for those reasons, we oppose.
Thank you. Okay. Was there anyone online? Okay. Why don't you turn your camera on? You have 1 minute or less.
Patrick Hager, you may begin.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Hedger. I am a resident of Fairfax County, and I'm the Director of Policy at NetChoice Technology Trade Association, advocating for free enterprise and free expression online. While the intent behind this bill is undoubtedly noble, NetChoice is opposed to SB 783 for three reasons. First and foremost, as some of my counterparts have touched on, Virginia's Consumer Data Protection Act requires data gatherers to comply with COPPA at the federal level. Like the CDPA, that applies to children only under the age of 13. So by redefining the term of child for these purposes to anyone under the age of 18, the legislation clearly conflicts with COPPA and would inevitably be preempted. Second, there are inherent cybersecurity and privacy concerns with any legislation related to age verification and parental consent. In this case, the bill would require companies to collect even more information about youth users and their families, including IDs and credit card numbers. Third, this bill would effectively marginalize the most at-risk youth by dramatically limiting their ability to access online resources of all kinds. Young people in broken homes, the foster system, and other situations without the ability to obtain consent would be unable to access wide swaths of the internet and be severely disadvantaged. And quickly, I'd like to address the example of that we wouldn't allow physical stores to follow their customers around. That's not quite correct, as many of those stores have loyalty programs where you can get a loyalty card and they do track your purchases to targeted ads to you. So this wouldn't just, this would create sort of a different standard for businesses online than some of their physical counterparts. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Senator Rome and Van Valkenburg. I think you had a question first, Senator Rome, for the Chamber of Progress witness.
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. So, all right, so Mr. Chair, I would ask the witness, could the witness please provide us with an example of LGBTQ-themed websites or anything else that someone would not be able to access under this bill? And I say this as the two out members of the state Senate are on this committee. And so obviously we're pretty tuned in on, in terms of what's going on here. The way that I read the bill in terms of a controller or processor shall obtain, it seems that the way that it's written is it's supposed to be the default of them, of the tech company in this case, of whoever is hosting the website itself, and basically saying you can't put trackers on. But does this mean that, for example, if you have an LGBTQ themed, a news site, and there's a whole number of them, Washington Blade, Metro Weekly, Advocate, name it, that these kids would not be able to read the news that's affecting their communities?
Thank you so much for your question, Senator Rome. At our reading of the bill, we believe, like, for example, there is the Trevor Project, which is a great organization that works with LGBTQ plus youth. And so our reading of the bill, we believe it requires platforms to obtain parental consent to access that service. So to answer your question, yes, it could end up restricting.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up question.
Yes.
So why is it that the Trevor Project in that case, I'm very familiar with Trevor Project, I like a lot of the work that they do. I like a lot of work that Trans Lifeline does, a lot of those groups. Why is it then that what is on those websites that disallows someone else to be able to access? What is it that they're using on those sites that's putting a tracker on someone, and therefore they're not going to be able to be in compliance with this law? How does that work?
Yes, so I believe they have a resource that if a young person is interacting with LGBT plus content online, sometimes there will be some targeted resources that will pop up on their feed or whatever it may be that has resources for them, whether that be resources for their health or resources for their mental health, that sort of thing. And so we believe that that sort of service would be limited.
Mr. Chair, follow-up question then. So at the same time, just to make sure that I'm correct, Mr. Chair, that the user can still go onto that service's website, can still check that website itself. The issue here is about whether or not the website is more or less responding back to them at that point by saying, okay, we're going to have this push thing that goes over to you. Wouldn't they still be able to access the site itself? And why is it that simply interacting with the site automatically means that that user is going to be profiled?
Your question. Again, our reading of the bill, we read it as if it prohibits access to online services and resources. And so we believe that by requiring platforms to obtain verifiable parental consent, that would restrict what you're saying.
Mr. Chairman, can I have council give us a neutral viewpoint about basically just whether or not someone would be able to simply access the website itself and whether the website would go dark for that person under this bill?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rome, my reading of this bill on lines 180, starting on line 183, it mentions that a controller or processor shall obtain verifiable parental consent prior to registering any child with the controller or processor's product or service, or before collecting, using, or disclosing such child's personal data. So I think my understanding would be is that the child would have to be registered with such website in order for this to apply.
Mr. Chair, may I ask the patron to come and address this, please?
Yes, Senator Suderline, please, if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Rome. Yes, so unless they're requiring you to register, there would be no issue. There would be no issue unless they wanted to somehow paywall the content, or they were requiring registration so that you could continue to use their site. If they are truly a benevolent organization trying to make resources available to folks, I don't know why they would require registration at all. So if there's a concern about folks getting health information that other people might not want them to have, I think that these sites, my knowledge, they make it freely available. And they don't require you to put in your contact information or anything like that, and there wouldn't be any restriction then.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'll save further comments till other people have had a chance to weigh in.
Thank you. Okay, Senator Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I think this is for Senator Suderline. It might be for staff. As you guys may remember, we had a back and forth because of my bill last year that has created the kind of framework for child data privacy along with Delegate Maldonado. And he tried to amend my bill to 18 last year, and we rejected that because we wanted to keep it in line with COPPA. And so my question is, because I'm not sympathetic to any of the opposition, they're going to come up and say the same thing about my bill in like 30 minutes, and I think they're wrong, and I'll talk about why they're wrong on my bill. But if we were to implement this bill legally, how would that interact with the law that we currently have on the books now? And what I mean by that is, if we implement this, would that put it, because this will get a lawsuit, right? Which is not a reason to not do it, but it will. Would that then hold up the law that we currently have?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe that it would be federally preempted, but if there is the concern for that, we could change the definition to make it clear that it's from 13 to 18-year-olds so that federal law would continue governing those under 13 and that we would be providing this safeguard for
I'm more
13
concerned.
to 18-year-olds.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm more concerned about our law.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so if we made the definition so that these provisions applied to folks 13 to 18, then that would ensure that there was not. I don't believe that there's federal preemption, but if anyone's concerned about that, that would be
Mr. Chair.
a path around that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can I just ask staff if they agree with what the senator is saying?
Of course they do.
Or staff? Council. If we were to change the definition to 13 to 18, would that make it so that the current law as it exists, as was passed last year, would be fine, for lack of a better word, because it's late in the day, and then this bill would itself just be 13 to 18, or is that definition going to change the whole thing, not just this part of the law that Senator Suderline is trying to impact?
Mr. Chair, Senator Van Valkenburg, there are portions of the Consumer Data Protection Act that apply to a child as it's defined. I think amending the definition would not impact how the law operates. If I'm understanding your question.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Council, yeah, I want to make sure that if we implement this law and it goes into a court, the law that we passed last year, which is in effect for people 13 and under, and if the federal government changes the age in CAPO, which I think is in the process of happening, I want to make sure that that law, which has pretty ample privacy protections for kids under 13, I want to make sure that that wouldn't get caught up in any lawsuit and be enjoined because it's working and functioning right now. So if we implement this law, I would want to make sure that only the parts that Senator Suderline are trying to put in place are what would get caught up in that.
Mr. Chair, Senator, my understanding of the law that was passed last year in section 59.1578 refers to no controller shall process any personal data collected from a known child for the purposes of targeted advertising, the sale of such personal data, or profiling, subject to consent by the child. So this, I'll defer to other counsel on this.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Van Valkenburg, if I understand your concern, I wonder if we could just have a definition of child specifically for this code section. So that if your concern is, if we're changing the definition of child for the purposes of the entire Consumer Data Protection Act, and then that could get into some sort of litigation.
Yes.
We could move the definition, we could have a definition of child specifically for purposes of the new section added by Senator Suderline.
Sounds great.
To make that amendment, Mr. Chair.
I think you're trying to amend on line 183, 186, and 187, where it says child to say 13 to 18-year-old child, or 13 to 17-year-old.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we would strike the definition change in line 31. So we would unstrike 13.
And then what we will do is then in the new section 59.1577.1, we will add probably at the end a new subsection C and said section child shall mean person ages under the age of 18 or 13 to 18 or whatever, dealer's choice.
Mr. Chair.
Chairman Pike, yeah.
I'm sorry, we've got a long docket and we're legislating really complex stuff. We just passed a pretty important law last year on the subject. I mean, I hate to discussion, this is really important changes, and if we're going to make changes on the fly, I'm not comfortable moving forward at all. I'd move to PBI.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Okay, was that seconded? Okay, so there's a motion and a second to PBI the bill. Let's see if the bill doesn't PBI, then you can amend it, or, if it's going to move forward. Unless there are other burning desires, we will vote on the board.
Ayes 8, noes 6, 1 abstention.
Okay, so that bill fails to report. PBIs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Chairman Pike has some motions from on bills that aren't here from members, other senators with their consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've spoken with the patron on Senate Bill 399, Senator Stanley. He's asked that to go by for the day, and so move.
So,
1399.
Okay, so all in favor of 1399 going by for the day, will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that bill goes by.
So next up, Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 976. I've spoken with Senator Stewart, and he feels that there's been discussions that have been productive, is what he's indicated and represented, and has asked that Senate Bill 976 be stricken, and so move.
Second. Okay, that's a recorded vote, so we're going to vote on striking SB 976. Okay, that bill, okay, that bill is stricken.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, also from Senator Stewart, Senate Bill 1455. Same relative discussions. He felt there's been progress made in some discussions, and he also requests that the bill be stricken, and I so move.
Okay, the vote will be on striking SB 1455 from the docket.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Thank you. Okay, Senator Salim, thank you for your patience. Please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could start with SB 1170.
Okay, we'll give our attention to SB 1170, the Conflicts of Interest Advisory Act to include the disclosure of digital assets on the Statement of Economic Interest. Please explain your bill.
Yep, Mr. Chair, it is a simple, straightforward bill. It proposes that the Virginia Conflict of Interest and Ethics Advisory Council require that the disclosure of digital assets on the Statement of Economic Interest form. It really aims to enhance transparency by ensuring that public officials disclose holding in digital assets as defined in the bill, thereby promoting ethical governance in the context of emerging technologies, where you hear about digital assets from cryptocurrency to everything in between. We are legally not required to disclose that. And again, this is a simple bill to have our Ethics Advisory Council update their form to include that line.
Is Mr. Petto still in the room? Hi, Stuart, could you tell us, is this easy to implement for you all?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Stuart Petto, Ethics Council. Yes, it actually would be fairly easy to do it, provided we do it on an existing schedule, which I assume is what the council would probably recommend, because that's the most feasible thing. So it could be done.
Okay, and would it be if you had a cryptocurrency, would I say that I had I don't know how they describe the units, would it be the dollar value of it as of the day of the form being filed, or would it just be the number of crypto units or whatever?
Good question, Mr. Chairman. If we put it on the existing schedule, as you may recall, it's sort of categories, so 5 to 50, 50 to 250, more than 250.
Okay, the general value. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I should say that the Ethics Council does not officially have a position on this bill. One policy consideration that everyone on this committee should be aware of, like I said, the council has no position on this, I have no position on this, but currently all of the reporting requirements on the Statement of Economic Interest are things that trigger a personal interest. So you disclose things like, I have an interest in a business, I have an interest in a company, real estate, or employment. We do not currently require any disclosure of just assets, like I have gold bullion for investment purposes, or I have a couple racehorses, or I have collectibles for investment purposes. Assets are not. So this would be kind of more of a larger change than people may be aware of, because for the first time, it'll be a pure asset that the state is asking employees and officers to disclose.
Thank you. Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Petto or for the sponsor, Senator Salim? Yes, Senator Williams-Graves.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So isn't there something on that form that asks you about if you have stock holdings or something or another like that? For in that 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 box?
That's correct, Senator, yeah, because those are like a company and that could trigger it, but you're absolutely correct. Any stock holdings or bonds issued by a private company that are in excess of $5,000 must be disclosed.
All right, so Mr. Chair, follow up? So if I understand it, and I'm really still learning this crypto thing, but if I understand it, isn't a digital asset an investment vehicle?
It's an investment vehicle. In some ways, it's like I own gold bullion. Same thing. If you have gold bullion, you do not need to disclose it. If you have a lot of cash on hand in a bank account or at your house, you do not disclose it. So it's an investment vehicle, but it's an asset. It's not tied to a particular company, like owning shares of Tesla or owning shares of IBM.
Okay.
So this is valid. I just point out for the committee, this is a policy consideration. This is the first time a pure asset like cash or gold bullion would have to be disclosed on the form. It certainly can be done. We don't have a position on this. It's just a policy consideration for the committee to consider.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator
Thank
Salim,
you.
did you want to comment briefly on that at all?
Mr. Chair, I do. I know when we talk about digital asset, it can be interchangeable compared to stocks or anything else. I do think in this sense, given we as the state don't have policies around digital assets or cryptocurrency, we would still be able to sort of showcase that, report these assets under that same category as a stock or an investment.
Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, well, I was going to say, I think just as a clarification, Mr. Chair, just as was stated, the huge difference here is cryptocurrency is just a currency. And if I decide that I'm going to buy euros and just hold on to them and the euro goes up in value, that's not something that you would disclose because it's just one other kind of currency. It's not tied. There is no Bitcoin Incorporated that you're helping their asset value go up by buying it. It's just a medium of exchange. And this really is a vastly different thing. I mean, we have had legislation that I've carried in the past to allow banks to be able to hold the keys to those digitally, to be able to be the fiduciary for those, because you could go because it's digital, you can't go just deposit it in a bank, and this would allow them to hold the digital keys to that to keep up with that for you in case you didn't want to keep up with that on your own. But it really is vastly different than an investment in a stock or a bond or some other kind of security. It's not regulated by as such because it can't be that. It's just that. And so because of that, as much as I appreciate what we're trying to get to, this is sort of going way beyond what we've ever done with this, and I would move to PBI at the appropriate time.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rome, there was a motion. Was there a second?
Second.
Okay, there was a motion and a second. It's Senator Rome.
So, Mr. Chairman, just speaking to the bill and just in response to the senator, I think maybe one thing that we might look at that's a little bit different, though, as opposed to dealing with, like foreign currencies, whatever, is that the Code of Virginia, as we have bills that keep coming in that deal with the regulation of cryptocurrency and its interaction in Virginia. And so I think that's different because we're not dealing with, bills that are regulating Virginia's interaction with the euro, right? So I think we're dealing with something that does deal with the code on a more consistent basis than when we're dealing with foreign currency per se. At the same time, my personal feeling is I wouldn't mind if you disclose all of that. I wouldn't mind if you disclosed, did you purchase, foreign, doesn't bother me, but the bill that's before us right now is just about crypto.
Okay.
Just for clarification, we're talking about digital assets. We're not specifically saying currency, because in the digital world, you can own NFTs, you can own a lot of things that are valued as to the dollar, including U.S. dollars, including euros and all that. But at the end of it, you're still holding a digital key. The value of that is what we're asking here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to have to pick up the pace. So we have a motion and a second to PBI. Unless there's an alternative motion, we're going to proceed to vote on this motion.
Substitute motion, move to report.
Yes, okay, so there was a motion to report. Was there a second to that one? Okay, so the motion was to PBI. All in favor signify on the voting board. If you're opposed, do the same.
Ayes 12, noes 2, 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you, Senator Salim. When you go back to courts, could you send over Senator Boysko, Perry, and Favola? Tell them they're on deck. Oh, she's here. Good. Okay, if you
Mr.
want
Chair,
to tell Senator.
I believe I have another bill.
Oh, let's do that. Maybe we'll have better luck.
This one's easier. Senate Bill 1400, and there is a substitute.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Senator Salim.
Yep. So the original intent of SB 1400 was to prohibit sales and the use of algorithmic rent-setting tools These tools use non-public competitor data to recommend rent prices, potentially leading to rent inflation and reduced market competition. The bill categorizes violation of unfair and deceptive trade practices subject to civil penalties and legal actions. The substitute itself, compared to what the original bill was, the substitute narrowly alters the underlying bill by ensuring that the definition focuses directly on revenue management software and the use of non-public competitor data. Additionally, the substitute makes it unlawful to sell, license, or provide such devices to landlords and further prohibit landlords from using them. In addition, in the substitute, the bill includes a provision that each month a violation occurs, each unit for which the software is used counts as a separate violation. So the overall goal of this is, I won't name any specific companies, but there are softwares where they will take data from individual landlords and use that as a pricing point to go ahead and set the rent and go back to those same landlords to say, we got you a specific price for your rent in this area, and we'll guide them in terms of whether prices go up or down. However, the data that's used is not available to the public at a subscription base or at a free option either. And what that ends up doing is increasing rent across the board without the knowledge of the landlords realizing that the software is actually recommending the rent prices to either go up or down depending on what is being reported from them individually. From what we understand, it is not the landlords are doing this, it is the specific technology. So we just want to get to a point that we can reduce the use of that technology and ban it. And of course, there were some concerns from the realtors and other folks, and that's why the substitute was to make sure that it's a narrower version to alleviate those concerns. And there is a couple of lawsuits against a specific tech company that's providing this technology that's still pending at DOJ. I think 6 states along with DC have been in that lawsuit as well.
Thank you. So we have a substitute. We're going to take testimony first. Anyone who is against or has issues with the substitute, please come forward to speak. We're going to put 4 minutes on the clock, or 3 minutes on the clock for those. First, we'll take those with opposition. Please keep in mind there are several folks who want to share their comments, Joe.
Thank you. Opposed to bill, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Erin Corman with the Realtors. We do appreciate the senator putting in the substitute, but we do still have significant concerns about this bill. This bill is prefaced on a federal lawsuit that is still ongoing right now regarding algorithmic devices and whether putting public data or non-public data into the system is illegal under antitrust. And we just feel that it is premature to start prohibiting all algorithmic devices right now when the court hasn't even decided which part of the algorithmic device is illegal. On top of that, the way that this bill describes algorithmic devices is it describes it as non-public when there are plenty of algorithmic devices that are public, like the MLS uses only public data at this point. So we do have concerns about whether that would be brought into it. We also disagree with the placement of this in the code section. We've never regulated software developers in the Landlord-Tenant Act before, and so for those reasons, we just really feel like it's premature to do this law at this time, and we do oppose.
I don't know if you've seen this substitute. Is it your contention that the MLS would be prohibited under the substitute? Or?
I think the substitute gets much closer to not including the MLS, but it's defining an algorithmic device as non-public data, whereas that's not the case. It can use public or non-public. There are just still a lot of problems with it.
Thank you. Okay, please come forward. Everyone come close to the podium so we'll have less transit time when we go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ken Greider, and the substance of what is being discussed here, I agree with because I'm a victim in 2014 of
Wait, if
algorithmic.
you agree with the bill? You need to wait to testify. We're going to take you in a moment.
But I
this
want
is
to say,
for opponents.
but I disagree with the overall bill being passed because just that one part I agree with, but there is a much larger issue of slumlording and issues that go on with of landlord-tenant issues. I have a 100-page complaint with the FBI that spans 10 years and 4 parts. And so I think that it needs to be a more comprehensive discussion for landlord-tenant reform in the state. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Tracy Baynard with Guarwoods Consulting, representing RealPage, which is the company that is currently in litigation. We really want to thank the Senator Salim for the time he spent with us and his effort to try to work on this legislation, but we still have to oppose the presumption that non-private data being used is untoward or illegal or is raising rents has not been proven. We'd like to go through that court case and hopefully have the facts verified one way or the other.
Thank you.
Hi.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Bisma Ahmed with the Apartment and Office Building Association and the Virginia Apartment Management Association. I want to echo a lot of the comments that were already stated. We definitely appreciate Senator Salim bringing forward this substitute. Unfortunately, it does not address all of our concerns, so definitely want to open up the conversation. Just want to say AI tools really do help housing providers assess market trends and set competitive and fair rents, and getting rid of that does provide unpredictability in rental pricing. So we're strongly against it at this point. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Zach Lemaster with Gentry Lock Consulting here on behalf of the Northern Virginia Apartment Association, and would associate ourselves with the previous speaker.
Waiting online on this one? Okay. So those who are in support of this bill, we now will reset the clock for, I guess, 3 minutes again.
Those online who support the bill, please raise your hand.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ryan O'Toole with Freedom, Virginia. We support the bill. To address the state's housing crisis, we believe we both need to increase supply and deal with the renting problem and these algorithmic pricing devices, and the practices behind them are fundamentally unfair in our belief. Thank you.
Okay, come close to the podium if you want, so that the next person in line will be able to be heard quickly.
My name is Warren Campbell. I'm a community organizer with New Virginia Majority. We are working mainly in the housing sphere right now. And I just wanted to say that when you talk about using algorithms to maximize profits, that has intensely human cost in the real estate rental market. So New Virginia Majority and myself, we strongly support this bill.
Welcome.
Hello, members of the committee. I'm Amori Speed, organizer with New Virginia Majority as well, and I associate myself with the previous comment just made, and I support the bill.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jana Hobbs. I'm a resident of the city of Richmond and a member of New Virginia Majority. I'm asking that you support this bill because an algorithm cannot tell you how much my unit is valued at. Without an in-person assessment, in my personal opinion, and the algorithm can't make disclosures such as that my apartment has a history of rats.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Gustavo Espinosa with the Legal Aid Justice Center, and on behalf of the Allies for Housing Action, we support this bill. Thank you.
Sheila Hurley-Hennessy with the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We also support the bill for all the reasons previously mentioned. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Josue Castillo. I also organize tenants in a complex that have recently switched to RealPage. And what I can say, echoing the statements that was said by Jana, after the switch, their bills have been very high and unexplainable, and you can't really hold an algorithm accountable. So, thank you.
Okay, we have an online witness. If you could show yourself on camera, you have 30 seconds to weigh in, please.
Ms. Williams, you may begin.
Sheba Williams with No Left Turns and the Allies for Housing Action. We support the bill for the previous reasons stated. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rome.
Move to report the substitute.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to report, and then I'm going to turn to Senator Head, who's in the queue, wanted to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just got a couple of questions because I've got some real strong concerns with this. I really do appreciate all the people that are in support of this, I understand where you're coming from, and I really do genuinely appreciate the position. I think that you've got a lot, the concern and the issue is driven more by a lack of supply than anything else. And that we've got to figure out a way to address that, and I'm all about wanting to address that. But I'm very concerned about this because, question for the patron on this is, as I read this, an algorithmic device with this definition, if I as an individual create just a spreadsheet that runs some calculations and pull my own algorithm out of the air and pull data from whatever, whether it's public data, non-public data, definition of that is kind of broad. I think that could be a violation as I'm trying to just calculate what rent I should get. I'm also concerned because I look at, like, if you've got somebody with Airbnb and Vrbo, that would actually, with these definitions, fall into this same process. And that's just a natural part of the suggestions of those services that frequently they come in and say, you could be charging more. They also just as frequently come in and say, you'd be getting more rentals on those if you charged less and dropped your rate. I mean, that happens in about equal number on things as you're getting information back from those services. I think this would also, a site like apartments.com would also be completely blocked from being able to be used for this because of the way that it pulls back in, because it's pulling data in from the various members that are out there using that service, and their data is going in, and that's not public, but it's held by the company that's managing all of this. It's really incredibly broad, extraordinarily dangerous, and it gives me great concern. So I'm fearful about that. I'm hesitant to make a substitute motion, but I will have a substitute motion to PBI if anybody else wants to second that.
We have a substitute motion to PBI, and Sarah McPike is in the queue. We're going to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just speaking to the motion, I'm interested in the lawsuit. I think the hesitation that you hear from some of the committee members is the complexity around these issues. And my preference would be that JCOTS take a look at this to figure out what is in the background, what is the appropriate language that does not cause harm to a marketplace that's established, but still protects people that we heard from today. I think that's really of the interest. And
so Senator, had you amend your motion to PBI with a letter to JCOTS for review?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we're going to vote on whether to pass by indefinitely with a letter to JCOTS asking them to review the substitute and make a recommendation. Indicate your preferences, please, on the voting board.
You can go with mine. It just
Noes 3, 3 abstentions.
Okay, thank you, Senator Salim. This committee is getting to be tougher than courts. Okay, now we've got, next up is Senator Boysko, and then we'll hear from Senator Perry when she's done. Senator Boysko's bill is number...
SB 1136, and Mr. Chair,
okay.
I do have an amendment.
So let's turn our attention to SB 1136. Does
move the amendment.
Okay, there's a motion, a second on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, so we have an amendment now. Does the council want to just state what the change was? Is it simple to state or explain?
We can post it online in a minute, but we can read it. It's a little bit of text if y'all don't mind listening along. On line 54, after necessary, we're going to insert, in addition to any exemptions established pursuant to this subdivision, the Anti-Rent Gouging Board shall establish rules and procedures to grant a fair return rent increase exemption, including the criteria to evaluate eligibility for the exemption and any rent increase approved under the exemption. For purposes of this subdivision, a fair return means a return on investment, Romanet 1, sufficient to offset operating expenses, and Romanet 2, commensurate with returns on investment in other enterprises having comparable risks.
Thank you.
One more sentence. The Anti-Rent Gouging Board shall not grant a fair return rent increase for any rental unit where the landlord has failed to bring the rental unit into compliance with applicable building or housing code.
Thank you. Okay, Senator Boysko, why don't you tell us about your overall bill now?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. The bill would allow a locality to pass an ordinance to set an annual residential anti-rent gouging allowance up to 3% increase per year. It would not apply to new construction or rental buildings 10 years or younger. If you read the news at all, you know that rent has dramatically risen in the Commonwealth over the past several years. 1 out of 3 Virginia renters are rent burdened, paying more than a third of their gross income for rent. Average rents in Virginia increased by more than 10% in 2022 and more than triple that, some 30% in some localities. So in contrast, people who own their own homes have the ability to have a stabilized home cost, only receiving real estate property changes that are far less than the increases in rent. And also note that property owners benefit when they sell their property with financial gains that are unavailable to renters. Wages have not kept up with rising rents. Anti-rent gouging protections protect tenants from extreme rent increases, increase affordability, and reduce displacement and homelessness while allowing landlords a reasonable return on investment. Rent stabilization has been shown to alleviate the suffering and displacement caused by rising rent costs and as a pathway to prevent homelessness and prevent racial diversity within neighborhoods. I have carried this bill for a number of years and have a number of stakeholders who are here with us. I was thinking about the comparison to when you don't have enough housing stock to when we have a disaster and all of a sudden gas prices go up or water prices or toilet paper prices go up. We address those. There are concerns that people raise and say you can't just keep raising the rent or the cost of these products because you can. This is the same thing. This is people's lives. And so I have folks from the Legal Aid Justice Center, the New Virginia Majority, the Virginia Poverty Law Center, and other advocates who have been on the front lines with the individuals who have lived experience. And they're here today and would like to share their stories.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to try and pick up the pace a little bit. Before we get to questions, committee members, we're going to take testimonies. Let's do 2 minutes and 30 seconds each side. Those who are for this bill, please come forward. And I would ask if you are like a leader of a group to try and amongst yourself decide who's going to speak for longer, because we're going to try and just do 3 minutes and 30 seconds to get a sense of how this bill, for supporters at least, would benefit.
Those online who support the bill, please raise your hand.
Oh, come forward, please. And if you could all get close to the podium so you'll be next in line.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Larissa Zaire with Legal Aid Justice Center. We support SB 1136 because all Virginia families, no matter their race, income, or neighborhood, deserve the chance to build a future in their communities. But for renters, who are 1 in 3 of Virginia households, drastic rent increases are making this impossible. I want to use my time today to speak to the amendment that was read into the record, just to make sure that that comes across. I'm also available to answer any questions. The Fair Return Amendment was added to respond directly to concerns raised by many members of the committee. And if a locality, what this amendment does is if a locality would pass an anti-rent gouging ordinance, they must include this exemption. It's a guarantee for landlords a fair return on their investment. Similar laws across the country, there are around 200 localities and states who have anti-rent gouging ordinances in effect. They allow landlords an exemption from the yearly rent limit, in this case 3%, based on their operating costs and their fair return on investment. How this works, it's a widely implemented formula where they look at a landlord's income after operating expenses from the year prior to when the anti-rent gouging ordinance goes into effect, understanding that year the landlord raised rents for their own fair return. Then it adjusts that net operating income for inflation and looks at the current year operating expenses to make sure that they have the same rate of return. That is the exemption that has been built into the bill at this point and should assuage the concerns from landlords that they will be able to continue to make a fair rate of return. And we have to remember that what this bill's goal is to stabilize tenants, and that's what these ordinances do. They're proven to do. And the legislature can legislate to many concerns at the same time. There are many good bills that are increasing supply this year. For those reasons, we support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a minute and 30 seconds remaining. Please state your support.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Yo apoyo esta ley. Mi nombre es Cindy porque la verdad se me hace los aumentos muy abusivos.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cindy. I rent in Richmond, and I support this bill because the reality is that these rent hikes are abusive.
Thank you.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Lucrecia Jiménez y mi nombre es Lucrecia Jiménez.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Lucrecia Jimenez.
Y yo apoyo yo vivo en Richmond, Virginia y
I live in Richmond, Virginia. Usted apoya. And
¿cómo les digo apoyo?
solo dígalo. She supports the bill. Also, on behalf of the Henrico Education Association and the Richmond Education Association, they also support the bill.
I'm asking you to support this bill because 6 months after my apartments forced me to move to another unit, I went door dashing to my previous unit and it was twice the rent. And at the end of my most recent lease with them, they wanted me to increase from $9.40 to $12.99.
Hi, I'm Amori. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm an organizer with New Virginia Majority, and for the reasons previously stated, I support the bill.
The Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy also supports the bill, as does the Virginia Coalition for Immigrant Rights. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Christy Mara, speaking for the Virginia Poverty Law Center and Housing Opportunities Made Equal, both support the bill strongly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christian Martinez Lamus, CASA, we thank the patron for bringing this forward, and we strongly support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Gabby with Chapman Strategies, and on behalf of Loudoun County, we support the bill.
Okay, was there anyone online waiting? Okay, those online are going to have to show themselves on camera, and I ask that they be brief, less than 30 seconds each.
Sheba Williams, you may begin.
Yeah, Sheba Williams with No Left Turns and also Alliance for Housing Action. We support the bill. Thank you.
Jocelyn Hildebrand, you may begin.
I'm Jocelyn in Blacksburg. I'm with Virginia Organizing and the Statewide Housing Committee. We support the bill.
You may begin.
Hello, my name is Salsa Prom. I'm the Housing Justice Director at African Communities Together, and we support this bill. As a gentle reminder, this bill does not force localities to pass rent control ordinances, simply gives them the option to do so, and this puts the power of stabilizing communities back in the hands of localities instead of it being dictated by the profit interests of corporations. Additionally, implementing rent stability laws alone does not negatively affect housing supply, and conversely, lack of rent control does not increase affordable housing supply. We haven't had any rent control laws enacted, and yet we are still facing a significant deficit in the availability of affordable housing. So clearly rent control isn't the supply problem. This bill truly also works for all parties involved because not only does it prevent unreasonable rent increases.
Thank you for your testimony and support. Okay, we now will hear from those with a different view or who have issues with the bill. We'll reset the clock for 3 minutes and 30 seconds and get those online to raise their hands if they're opposed.
Those online who oppose the bill, please
Please.
raise your hand.
Please come forward.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Bisma Ahmed with the Apartment and Office Building Association and the Virginia Apartment Management Association. While we certainly sympathize with the intent of the bill, rent control has serious long-term consequences. We already know that we need 10,000 units per year just to keep up with demand. And we have not seen this rent control work. Instead, it discourages investment in rental housing, and it makes the affordability crisis even worse. And without the only source of income coming in for property owners, this forces housing providers to cut services, delay maintenance, especially in older, more affordable communities. And for example, in the city of Tacoma Park, Maryland, they adopted rent control in 1981, and then a report in 2017, a city commission report, found that absolutely no new multifamily rental properties have been constructed since. So that is it speaks for itself. So instead of splitting Virginia's housing market into 133 local policies, we need solutions that actually expand the supply. So for that reason, we ask that you oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Erin Corman, representing the Realtors. We do oppose this bill. I know you've heard me talk for years about supply and demand. We're 300,000 units short. This is the problem. The best way to protect these vulnerable tenants is to support targeted assistance for renters and to focus on increasing the housing supply. Rent control already exists out there in the United States, and the research has shown that it does not work. And so rather than going down that path, I think we should focus on increasing development, getting more housing on the ground, and targeted renter assistance. Thank you.
Thank you for those points. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Zach Lemaster here on behalf of the Northern Virginia Apartment Association, and we would associate our comments with the previous speakers.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tyler Craddock on behalf of Manufactured Housing Communities of Virginia. We also oppose the bill and associate our comments with those who've spoken before us.
Mr. Chair, Randy Grumbine, representing the Virginia Manufactured and Modular Housing Association. One issue of rent control for our industry is it could affect change of use. So some of the community owners, if they're not able to get a return to do the infrastructure improvement, et cetera, may just close their community altogether, taking affordable housing availability off as removing that as an option. So we oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the committee in queue for a motion or a comment are Senator Van Valkenburg and then Senator Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I would like to offer another amendment that I've talked to some of the folks about putting a 10-year sunset clause on this, and if I may speak to that.
Yeah, okay, so does council understand that it would expire after 10 years? Okay, Senator Van Valkenburg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As many as you know, I voted against this legislation last year, and I have concerns with it as well. And I continue to believe that the best way to solve our housing problems is supply. This bill says that you can have a 3% increase because of the amount of units they built. And so I think that shows that if we build things, we're going to, in the longer run, help. But recognizing that might not happen this year, and recognizing that the people are facing real problems now, if we accept this amendment, I'm going to vote for the bill. But the reason I'm putting the amendment on is because the real solution that we have to grapple with is real policy choices that impact supply. And so I would like to offer that amendment.
Second.
Okay, so there's an amendment before the committee to put a sunset of 10 years on this or authority for localities. All in favor of adopting the amendment will say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, one opposed. Okay, so there's the amended bills before us. Senator Boyce, do you want to sum up anything before
Yeah,
we...
I would like to just sum up.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Let me go to Senator Rome. She's next.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking to the bill as amended. So, Mr. Chair, when I see a lineup of speakers and we hear one group saying we are having immediate problems in the now, right now, and I see another group saying, hey, this could make the problem worse, X, Y, or Z, the problem's already bad. For them, the people who spoke today, this isn't about whether or not we're going to have enough new housing, coming online, by the end of this year, next year. It's how do they pay the rent now? We need immediate solutions right now for a lot of people. During the pandemic, when we had that pause on evictions, we had this moment of clarity of what happens when a system breaks down. And then immediately when that went away and the evictions started again, it was just like a line out the courthouse in localities all over Virginia because people were struggling with this. And so I think number one, the sunset, just that gives an option. Number two, this is local option. There is not a single one of our 133 localities in Virginia that is going to be compelled to have to do this under the law here. This is, let's try something. Maybe someone somewhere wants to give this a shot. Let's evaluate it. Let's look at it as a pilot program. Maybe someone wants to. And in other places, you can say, hey, that's not for my locality. It's not for me. It's not what I'm going to support. Okay, it's fine. But in this case, let's give it a shot because the rent is still too dang high.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a motion to report. Was there a second? Okay. Senator Boysko, did you want to sum up briefly?
Absolutely, yes. I originally carried this bill for Loudoun County when I represented them. Loudoun County is the second most wealthy county in the Commonwealth. And with massive growth, they have had huge population growth over the past decade. They still were asking and continue to, as you just heard someone just spoke, they still need that tool and are asking for it because these are real people that we have just heard from. And we have not been able to find a solution. I have worked year after year to try to get the business community come with me to find a way to solve this problem, and we have not gotten one. And so I hope that you will pass this bill.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Senator McPike, and I'm going to speak very briefly after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the patrons' work on this and the passion. It's an important area of an issue. I still have some concerns in terms of why, if I were to have predictability, I would put investment to 3% versus leaving it in the bank at 4.25%, just sitting in an interest rate. I mean, I've spent some time in New York this spring at an Urban Land Institute conference and talking to looking at macro financial projects, and the money is not in housing. We need housing stock. We need to ensure that the financial vehicles are there to invest in housing stock to resolve our supply. And furthermore, if we were going to do something like this, I'd prefer to see it statewide, something consistently applied versus me going one block, having a different set of rules as an investor. If I were, I'm not, but I'd rather have consistent rules of the road across all the Commonwealth. And I'm not sure that we're there. I'd have liked to see the substitute on the provisions that you had provided, which are really important. I had one issue in case in now Senator Rome's district on a mobile home park. And the sanitary line was basically destroyed where it could not be used. And those kids got an eviction notice on the first day of school, and there's a whole transaction that was going on. The only reason why it was saved was because they were able to refinance, repackage, and then redo and readjust rates and work with the whole family owners. Now, I understand that could be through a whole board. In that case, it was a nonprofit, and I understand it's exempt, but it also could apply to a private holder of doing that. So I have real concern about the predictability. If I have to deal with large cases, how long is it going to get for me to get approval and predictability to finance a whole new infrastructure package to save those homes? And so I like where the senator's going. There's a lot of details that I really want to work out because this is an important issue. But our number one, I think, issue in Virginia is pushing supply and figuring out that, because that'll also balance out prices.
Thank you, Senator. Before I go to Senator Williams-Graves, I just want to state last year I had voted against a similar bill. I'm going to be supporting this year. I think that I've heard from too many constituents whose rents have increased $300, $500, and not necessarily luxury apartments, and those same increases have not been met with adequate maintenance in terms of rodents and all kinds of conditions that, they're raising the rent but not putting the money into maintaining the properties. I see this as an experiment and we have to do something. So this is, I appreciate the effort. Okay, so so we'll proceed to vote on reporting. The motion was to report, is that correct? 1136.
Ayes 6, no 7, 2 abstentions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Senator Perry in the audience, and I believe that you had two bills, one of which, come forward, please. $14.59, was that the one that you wanted stricken?
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
so Senator McPike moves and Senator.
Yes, I do.
Senator Locke seconds to strike 1459, and we'll indicate our vote on the board.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Okay, so that bill is stricken. Then we'll take up the other bill on geolocation data.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that's Senate Bill 1023. This is a bill that just says that it says that these third-party people who collect your geolocation data, that they cannot offer that data for sale to other individuals. I think it's a relatively straightforward bill. As many of y'all know, I'm former prosecutor, but also former CIA officer. We saw recently a case that hit the news concerning an article about 3 billion phone coordinates were collected by a U.S. data broker and were exposed to detailed movements of U.S. military and intelligence workers in Germany, and concerns surrounding that. I'll tell the members of this committee about 5 minutes before I walked in here, I received a letter, an email from TechNet opposing this bill. I think it's been sent to you all, at least that's what they noted. I understand they have a lobbyist here, and reading their letter, what they essentially say is, hey, we're going to try and work on this at the federal level. You can opt out of this, and it's on the consumer to opt out. And so we don't know why they don't do that. And it's my position that you can't sell the information. There's no reason for you to be selling the information. We should err on the side of consumers. Happy to take any questions from the committee, though.
Yes, Senator. So basically, the heart of your bill is that they can't sell precise geolocation data. They can't say Russet Perry can be found at 600 Main Street in Richmond. Is that?
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there questions, further questions or comments?
Yep, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, question on that.
Senator Head.
When you're talking about precise geolocation data, is that limited to where you are currently or where you have been?
I think it's limited, Mr. Chairman. Senator Head, the language in the bill says not sell or offer for sale precise geolocation data concerning a consumer. So I think it would cover both.
Okay. So before we're going to take testimony, first those who are in support of this legislation, please come forward or raise your hand online. Okay. Those who have issues or are opposed to SB 1023, please come forward or raise your hand online as well. And what we're going to do is put 2 minutes on the clock, and if you can be succinct, that'd be appreciated.
Good afternoon, Chair Eben and members of the committee. Again, my name is Margaret Durkin, and I'm with TechNet. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak today on Senate Bill 1023. As I mentioned in prior testimony, Virginia passed a comprehensive data privacy law, and part of that privacy law was the opt-in of sensitive data. And as part of that sensitive data, precise geolocation is included in that. Therefore, we believe that this bill is not necessary. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Chair and esteemed committee members. Again, Hope Ledford with Chamber of Progress. Like has previously mentioned, already has the VPA, which geolocation data is already opt-in, so consumers have the ability to opt out of the sale of their personal data, including geolocation. Also important to note that geolocation data plays essential role in things like anti-fraud measures and working with law enforcement, so restricting this data will only create barriers that limit the effectiveness of these vital services. And for those reasons, we oppose this bill.
Thank you. Was there anyone online on this bill? Okay.
Move to report.
There was a motion to report and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we can vote. Amy?
Ayes 12, noes 3.
Chairman, members of the committee.
First of the day.
That's our first bill in 2.5 hours, I think, that we've passed. Okay. Now, Senator Favola was next in the queue. Until she's here, I'm going to ask, before we take other committee members, I see that Senator Sturdivant has been very patient waiting for the Van Valkenburg-Sturdivant bill to be considered, and then we're going to resume with the audience. Yeah, please.
Any excuse to get up and walk around, you know what I'm saying? My seatmate knows that.
Okay, so this is Senate Bill 1424.
So we move the substitute first.
Okay, so
Adopt the substitute.
there's a motion and a second to adopt a substitute for 1424, the one that incorporates the other Senator
And more.
Senator Sturdivant as the chief co-patron, and has some language changes. Okay.
Has that been
So
moved?
there's a motion second, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So the
Okay.
substitutes before.
So yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Some of that substitute is incorporating language from Senator Sturdivant's bill, and some of it's some other things. I'll go through it. As many of you know, because I'm carrying a bunch of bills, I care a lot about housing. Housing prices are skyrocketing. If you were in local government, you heard my thing about the average home price in the last 5 years skyrocketing. It's something like over 100 of our localities have seen a greater than 50% increase in the median home sale in the last 5 years. We have like 6 or 7 where the median home sale value has gone up over 100% in the last 5 years. In the Richmond region, the average is around 57%. The lowest locality is New Kent at 48%. And that's the median home price in the last 5 years. We have our first locality that's over $1 million. That's Falls Church, for anybody that cares. And so housing prices are going up. And in some of this is due to corporations who are buying up single-family homes, duplexes, and manufactured homes. Part of the substitute was making sure we incorporated, as was in Senator Sturdivant's bill, duplexes and manufactured homes. When they buy these up, they're pricing out first-time home buyers, lower-income families. They're not able to buy anymore because the market's inflated. And then a lot of the times these companies are also hiking up rents, which are making neighborhoods unavailable to folks who aren't even looking to buy. And so this bill's trying to solve that problem. It bans prohibited businesses from purchasing additional single-family and manufactured homes on or after July 1, 2025. It requires prohibited businesses to register their housing stock that they acquired before then with the Secretary of the Commonwealth or face a civil penalty. Part of the substitute is putting that civil penalty in the Housing Trust Fund. It requires prohibited businesses to sell, transfer, or divest their housing portfolio over the course of years. You can see that in the bill. And it requires prohibited businesses that plan to sell their manufactured home parks to certify that the buyer does not qualify as a prohibited businesses. In this bill, prohibited businesses are defined as, quote, any partnership, corporation, or real estate investment trust that manages funds pooled from investors and has an aggregate of $50 million or more in net value or assets under management on any day during a taxable year. 501c3 nonprofits and home builders would not be considered prohibited businesses for the purposes of this bill. Additionally, the substitute will ensure that any interested party that unknowingly takes part in a transaction is held harmless from potential liability. Right? If you don't know that you're facilitating a sale to one of these companies, you shouldn't be held liable. Finally, the most recent substitute will also fund, I already mentioned this, will funnel money to the Housing Trust Fund, the civil penalties. I'll just end and then I'll turn it over to Senator Sturdivant. That a 2023 report from the Urban Institute found that as of June 2022, there were over 500,000 single-family homes nationwide owned by large institutional investors. That's roughly 3.8% of all single-family rentals. The report also shows that these large investment firms intentionally seek out metropolitan areas with limited housing supply and sharp increases in rent and population. That literally applies to the entire Commonwealth of Virginia in this moment, that scenario, as I explained at the beginning. And, you know, Richmond is just one of these areas being hit. Okay, why are we being snarky? Okay. This bill will free up some of our existing stock. We should be doing anything. We should be doing anything we can do to help people. I'll stop there.
Senator Sturtevant, did you want to
Just
add?
very briefly, reading the committee, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Van Valkenburg. I just say data that I've gotten from HUD identifies this as a real issue that we are experiencing in Virginia. In the Virginia Beach metro area, there are about 3,000 of these homes that are owned by these extraordinarily large institutional investors. In the Northern Virginia, D.C. metro area, it's also about 4,000. And in Richmond area, my area, it's over 4,000 of these homes. So in each of these areas, you're talking about what would otherwise be a couple of very large suburban neighborhoods in terms of the number of single-family homes that are being bought up by these hedge funds and institutional investors, which again makes it more difficult for regular people to be able to afford a home.
Thank you. Okay, Sarah Williams-Graves, you had a comment or a motion?
Yes, so thank you for combining these bills. I can attest to exactly what you're talking about. A couple of years ago, I had a builder build about 4 or 5 homes in a neighborhood, and within 24 hours of putting them on the market, I had contracts sent to me for all of them for full price in cash, no closing cost requests, and for us, these were acquired by the builder. The land was acquired by the builder from the city, so there was a deed restriction to non-owner occupancy. They had to be owner occupants, so we were able to reject the contracts. But it does happen quite frequently, and what it does is it prevents realistic buyers who would buy the home, stay in the home, from having the opportunity to do that because they're making this cash offer with no closing costs and a quick 2-3 week closing date. And so I totally get it. So thank you. When you talked about the REITs, does it prohibit a REIT that is just a residential REIT, real estate investment trust, sorry. Does it prohibit just a residential real estate investment trust from buying, or does it prohibit any real estate investment trust from buying? Because you have them, they're a commercial, they're a medical, and they're a residential.
The way I read the bill, correct me if I'm wrong, senators, it's if they have a value of more than $50 million, they're prohibited from doing that.
$50 million, okay. So it doesn't, the differentiation between residential, commercial, medical is irrelevant? Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so it would be any investor then. Okay, are there motions on this vehicle now? Okay, there's a motion and there's a motion and a second to report the substitute and re-refer to finance of SB 1424. Unless there's, we can go ahead and vote. Wait, did we take testimony? We did not. Okay, is there anyone in the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who's compelled to slow down this train?
If
You want to give
McPike was
thumbs
upset
up?
with my talking.
Okay, we got some thumbs up. Any thumbs downs? Okay, wait. If you want to very briefly, the thumbs down starting, come up forward and just tell us very briefly why you don't like this bill. Very briefly. We're going to try and get this committee back on track.
Mr. Chair, Randy Grumbine, representing the Virginia Manufactured and Modular Housing Association. We understand the premise. We understand the problem it fixes. But as we see it, it's throwing all the apples out and not just the bad apples. And so there are community owners that would be excluded from purchasing properties here that are active in Virginia. And some of those property owners are coming into properties that have not been improved for decades. And they have the resources to do the improvements to improve the quality of the community. So for those reasons, we would oppose this bill.
Thank you. Okay, any others want to briefly state their concern?
Thank you. Erin Corman with the Realtors. We obviously have significant concerns about this bill, just in the broad sense of telling a seller who they can sell their property to. But I think the bill is also broad, it's overly broad in the sense that it doesn't consider, there are some properties out there that a buyer could never be qualified to buy, they could never get financing for, that these corporations are coming in, buying and rehabbing and eventually returning them to the housing supply. So I think the bill is too broad. It doesn't take that into account, and we do oppose.
But if the bill should advance, you may want to work with the sponsors to see if they
Sure, of
can
course.
make exceptions. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Tyler Craddock, Manufactured Housing Communities of Virginia. We oppose for the same reasons Mr. Grumbine mentioned. A lot of our folks are in the business of not necessarily being real estate investors, but owning and operating parks, and that would exclude some of those folks from being able to acquire properties.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Bruning with Virginia Bankers Association. Just like last year when we had a similar bill, we opposed the bill. This version's a little bit better, but we still have concerns, especially on the divestment side of things.
Yeah, it gets better. Andrew Clark with the Home Builders Association of Virginia. Having just read the substitute, I don't know how this would play with this, but there are a lot of larger national home builders who actually will spin off REITs to put land into just to kind of protect the home building side of the company. So they're affiliated with a REIT, and those REITs are used to acquire land, big tracts of land with sometimes a single home or a barn or whatever on it. So it has some improvement on it, but there aren't buying up homes. So the definition of single-family home includes that house and the other land. So I think we're willing to work with to kind of move forward to refine that language, but other than that, so I'm somewhere in between. Yeah.
If this bill advances on fixing it through the process, narrowing it. Those who are eager to get in front of this train of passage, come forward and just tell us you like it or why you like it, briefly.
Line in support, please raise your hand.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Daniel Rezai, Virginia Poverty Law Center. I will try to keep this very, very short. We support this work. The specifics is manufactured housing communities throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia are being gobbled up by these hedge funds. And the long-term ramifications means that low-income housing is impacted because homeowners are forced to live in substandard conditions with no one to ever get in touch with. One example, Floyd County, Virginia Park was bought by a hedge fund. They lost water on December 1st. As of this week, we still do not know if the park has water because they have nobody to get in touch with. So I will leave you all with that. We highly support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Jared Calfrey with AARP Virginia, and reading the committee, I will stick with my thumbs up.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Gustavo Espinosa with the Legal Aid Justice Center. I'll do a little bit more than thumbs up. We organize and advocate with low-income renters in Northern and Central Virginia, and I specifically organized with a group of residents in 605 Mobile Home Park in Louisa County. I brought a newspaper from when their rent was increased from $445 to $675. And these are families that have invested in their homes, have already purchased their homes, are just renting the dirt underneath. These are elderly and disabled folks that get fixed incomes. When your rent is increased like this by a private equity firm, you have nothing to do. You have no way to survive. The headline reads, "Mobile home rents rising," and they continue to rise. As conditions deteriorate, I still get calls from the folks living here saying there's no water, there's no property manager on site. Other newspaper headlines have called these private equity firms vultures, and that's what they are. So please do support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Sheila Hurley Hennessy with the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy. We also support the bill and associate our comments. I'm also authorized to speak that New Virginia Majority supports this bill as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Chair, members of the committee, Ryan O'Toole with Freedom, Virginia. We support the bill.
Thanks. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, I believe, to report. Was that the motion? Yep. Okay, and was it finance? And we'll refer to finance, the substitute. Okay, so we'll proceed to vote on that motion.
Ayes 9, no 6.
Okay, the bill is referred to finance with a recommendation to report. Thank you. Okay, Senator Favola, thank you for being patient. Then we're going to come to Senator Durant.
Chairman, I have two bills before the committee. One is 1386, and this bill is a recommendation of the Joint Commission to evaluate the response to the pandemic. The bill does three things. It provides for the Department of Emergency Management to consult with DBHDS to develop standardized guidelines so we can provide mental health support to our responders. Second, it requires the Department of Emergency Management to develop a training program that incorporates the National Incident Management System principles, so all of our responders are aware of what these principles are and can act accordingly, and agency heads would be required to complete the training within 6 months of their appointment, and then 2 years thereafter. And then the third item, this bill actually helps us, we believe, in recruiting volunteers. It provides for the Department to offer health and safety training to volunteer organizations with the hope that more volunteers will come forth when we do have an emergency. Again, this is a recommendation from that Joint Commission.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a recommendation from the Joint Subcommittee to Study Pandemic Response and Preparedness. There is a fiscal impact, so it would need to be, the motion, if it's to be successful, would be to report and refer to finance.
That's correct.
For 1386. Is there anyone here who feels compelled to weigh in, give us new information about this bill and support?
In support, please raise your hands.
Okay, anyone who would be opposing this legislation of preparing ourselves for disasters and
Those in line.
pandemics? Okay, is there a motion? Okay, there's a motion and a second to report and re-refer to finance. All in favor signify your support on the voting board, otherwise do the same.
Your number 3.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My second bill is Senate Bill 1387. This also is a recommendation from the Joint Commission to study our response to the pandemic. This bill is very straightforward. It directs the Chief Information Officer to, in cooperation with the Virginia Information Technologies Agency, to develop an emergency resource management system for use in the Commonwealth should we have an emergency. And the emergency resource management system is not really defined, but we're expecting it would be something that would identify resources available, staffing available, and any kind of deployment information. That's the bill. There is a fiscal note.
Yes, so this bill, the motion would be to report and refer to finance. Is there anyone who's compelled to give a thumbs up on this bill or to come forward with new information that we don't have? Anyone who was opposed? Okay, there's a motion and a second to report and we refer to finance, and no one's waiting online to speak, I don't think. So we will proceed to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Durant, thank you for your patience. It's time to talk about bingo.
Bingo. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we got Senate Bill 1241, and we do have, I believe it's a substitute.
There's a motion from Senator McPike, a second from Senator Reeves to adopt the substitute. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Senator Durant, if you could tell us about your changes and in the substitute.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, a lot about how this works now, more than I ever thought that I was going to, but
there's a permitting process and a registration process. So we've switched this from the permitting process to registration. I guess the General Assembly a couple years ago had streamlined that registration process. So this will add to the eligibility of nonprofits, the definition of 55-plus communities as defined in the bill. And they will still have to follow the same rules as the nonprofits, where they've got a cap and how much of the 40,000, they will still be obligated to donate 10% to a nonprofit, and it will limit them to be able to play bingo once a month.
Thank you for the presentation. Is it Mr. Menifee here? Could you come forward? I think Senator Reeves has a question.
He's just technical. Always technical.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Menifee with VDEX.
Are you okay with the implementation of the wording as it sets now to make it to where we don't have the issue that we tried to solve previously with some of the folks that like to take advantage of us? Does it prevent that from happening?
Mr. Chairman, in response to the senator's question, certainly this bill allows a 55-plus community to do registration or permit, and they're subject to all the same requirements as all permittees and registration. So to answer the question, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
And
thank you, Mike.
Mr. Menifee, could I ask, just in terms of the receipts, a 55-plus community, would they be profiting from the bingo? It was described that at least 10% of the proceeds would go to charity, but like assisted. How would this work in terms of where the money ends up?
Well, certainly any money that's generated will go back as prizes or other gaming expenses, and then 10% of the gross receipts will be given back to, in this case, in this bill, to a 501c3 organization.
I see. So there could be a little bit of profit for the
There could be.
proprietor.
That's going to be left up to the organization to decide that. But from my understanding from the senator, that they tend to, give back all the money other than 10%, in this case, back to the 501c3 organization.
Okay. Thank you. Are there further questions or motions?
Move to report and re-refer to finance.
Okay, the motion and second was to report and re-refer the bill. Well, I didn't ask, is there anyone who has a burning desire to say this is a good thing with a thumbs up or otherwise? Anyone burning desire to oppose this?
I didn't have to bring it by this time, so.
Okay, so we will proceed to vote on the motion.
Old people bingo. Y'all don't like grandma.
Ayes 10,
Well-
noes 5.
Okay,
Let the
thank you,
folks play
Senator.
bingo. Okay.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, as I mentioned to you, other with Senate Bill 440, we worked at, this is a data privacy bill relating to connected cars, when you connect it with your Bluetooth. And we did have some further conversations with stakeholders on it. And I think there's some interest in working on this through in the next year. So I would.
So do you want that to go by for the day or strike it?
Yep, yeah, move it by for the day if we can, please.
What was that bill number?
That's
1440.
I'm sorry, 1440.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to take 1440 by for the day. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay,
Thank
that
you
bill
very much,
goes
Mr. Chair.
by for the day. Thank you. Okay, Senator Marsden, I believe, is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Senate Bill 1494. All set? All right, thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill 1494 is a bill that brings increased transparency to campaigns in Virginia, specifically through requiring mega donors to register as lobbyists. And basically what this bill seeks to do is to require any person or entity that makes or anticipates making contributions of $1 million or more in a calendar year to candidates for office or committees organized under the Campaign Finance Disclosure Act to register as a lobbyist. I want to clarify that this is an aggregate of $1 million across all candidates or committees in a calendar year. This would only apply to Virginia entities. This bill requires those large donors to file the same disclosure forms that we all do with the Ethics Council. As a reminder, by the way, all y'all were due in 2 days. So at any rate, the These standard disclosures of financial holdings for elected officials and candidates assure that there is transparency for any perceived conflict of interest. I wanted to start with a really high figure here to kind of break the ice and get something going. It's not going to affect a whole lot of folks, but it's not really a big, huge issue to register as a lobbyist and fill out your disclosure forms. But, I had run it by the big money out folks in my office. They seem to really like it. I don't know if they're here, but this is a start. I mean, we could work the money down over the next few years, but it just requires some transparency.
Even if they're not lobbying, they're just trying to impact an election, you want them to fill out a detailed financial disclosure of these donors, these mega donors?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Senator Rum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I would ask the patron on this is, no, I guess I have a couple of questions. So number one, would this apply to self-funders as well?
Self-funders?
Yeah, so if you contribute under this bill more than $1 million to your own campaign, would you then have to register as a lobbyist?
You would be covered as a candidate, whether you gave yourself $1 million or $100.
Well, might I point out, counsel can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are a candidate for office, you've filed a detailed financial disclosure form already.
Right, but that doesn't make you a lobbyist.
Right, okay.
Right, and so that's what I'm trying to find out is, would you then have to file as a lobbyist for that?
File?
Would you then have to file as a lobbyist if you gave your own campaign money under this bill?
No, you wouldn't. If you spend $1 million, you wouldn't be a lobbyist. You wouldn't be eligible under this thing because you're required by another.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, follow-up question is...
Senator Rum.
Thank you. Would the candidate PACs, so let's say you have any of us here, all of us have our own campaign finance PACs, right? And one of them donates a bunch of money in aggregate over however much. I'm looking at some of them right now on VPAP. Would those members then, who run those PACs, have to register as lobbyists?
I would guess if it hit $1 million.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, so then, I'm looking right now, and this means that, yep, they're, like, this Speaker of the House would have to register as a lobbyist?
No, that would be covered under other laws.
No, right. It's raising from his campaign committee, and under this, based on the 2023 election cycle, having donated $2.2 million from that committee, would he or anyone from that committee have to then register as a lobbyist?
Mm-hmm. I think that the point of being the lobbyist is that you'd have to file the disclosure and the ethics rules, and I believe they, in your PAC, you're held to a certain standard, are you not?
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I'm trying to figure out is, under this bill, do they have to do that? It's just a yes or no, do they have to register?
Why don't you, if you have a specific question about who would be covered, maybe counsel would be a good person.
All right, so, Mr. Chair, I'll defer to counsel. Basically, just would a candidate who has a PAC, or an incumbent, I should say, who has a PAC, and then they make more than $1 million of donations, to various donations throughout the year, or they intend to under this bill, would that person have to register as a lobbyist under this bill?
Chair, Senator Rome, yes, that is my understanding of this bill.
Okay. And Senator Rome, I don't know that I'd have a problem with that, because the big thing here is getting the disclosure statements in there and signing the ethics statement and what have you. So I don't, that wouldn't bother me at all if they had to register as a lobbyist. If the Speaker had to register as a lobbyist, it's just paperwork.
And then, Mr. Chair, one last question on that.
Senator Rome, last question.
All right, so the last question is, we have 4 party caucuses between the General Assembly, right? You have the Democratic House and Democratic Senate caucuses, Republican House, Republican Senate caucuses. Would those caucuses, or whoever is registered of those caucuses, then have to register as a lobbyist?
Well, they're already fully transparent. They have to reveal who they're giving
their money
from,
what I'm asking is,
where they're giving
Mr.
it
Chair.
to, and,
Senator
question to
Rum's-
council.
Yes,
would they
Senator
have to
Rum.
register as a lobbyist? Whoever runs the House Democratic, House Republican, Senate Democratic, Senate Republican caucus, would they have to, or their treasurer or someone from them, have to register as a lobbyist under this?
Mr. Chair, Senator Rome, that is my understanding of
Okay,
this bill.
thank you.
I think, Mr. Chairman, a friendly amendment would be to exclude those PACs and caucuses.
I don't know if we're going to do a lot of surgery here, but we did have a sentiment. There was a motion made to PBI and I believe a second. So if you have a final comment, Senator Marston, before we vote, we can take that.
I just think we need to start somewhere.
I would just mention also, there are bills to limit how much people can give, and Senator Dietz has a bill that passed at a P&E yesterday that I think is headed for a substitute.
I don't know how that bill's going to do, but allowing competing concepts is not necessarily a bad idea.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to PBI SB 1494. Let's vote on the board.
Ayes 14, noes 1.
Senator
Thank you,
Reed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Marsden. Okay. Now we can take up this is not a full democracy. But we're going to Senator Rouse caught my ear first. Do you have to leave for? Okay. We're going to go with Senator Rouse, then we're going to turn to Senator Jordan. Rouse and then Jordan. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be quick. We saw this bill before,
Which the bill
SB
number?
1430, and this is the Federal Furloughed Workers Protection. And I'd like to have a substitute, Mr. Chairman.
Motion and a second to adopt a substitute for SB 1430. All in favor of adopting the substitute will say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's being distributed, and Senator Rouse is going to explain it to us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The substitute that will amend the relevant code section instead of creating a new section. The substitute language extends furloughed workers' foreclosure protection from 30 to 60 days to bring it in line with the eviction protection, which is already 60 days in current law. The substitute also removes the 14-day minimum length of a government shutdown that is currently required before the eviction and foreclosure protections take effect. There's also an emergency clause on the bill because a government shutdown could happen or could come as soon as March. And with that very real potential for a government shutdown this year, it's vitally important that we are fully prepared to stand behind the workers and their families who are most affected. And this bill will help ensure that they do not lose their homes simply because of temporary delay in their pay due to no fault of their own. Unfortunately, this bill does not go as far as to protect federal workers from the federal buyout that the president has offered them. This bill is only in case of the government shutdown, and we have voted in support of this bill in the past, and we have it once again before the committee. So I hope the committee votes favorably for this bill.
Okay, but we're going to take questions, but there's a motion and a second to report the substitute, the 1430. And then there was a question I heard over here, Senator Craig.
Yes, thank you. This is a question for the patron. So I had a constituent back during COVID that was renting their home. They were in the military, renting their home to someone when they were allowed to, the renters were allowed to not pay rent. The owners of the house, who were in another state because they were in the military, called me and said, they have stopped paying our rent. We know they still work, but they're falling under this COVID rent.
This is not.
And the other people almost lost their house because the mortgage company didn't care about that.
Yes, sir.
So would that be similar? Like if I rent?
Mr. Chair and
Senator Rouse.
Senator Christy Craig, this bill is in intent of dealing with those folks who are federal workers in case the government shuts down. There were COVID protections during that time to keep people in their homes, but this is separate as pertaining to a government shutdown in case of workers are furloughed.
Mr. Chair.
Senator McKay.
To pinpoint, this is legislation that I initially passed during the federal government shutdown in, I'm losing track of the years, the numbers, but 19, and then we also did it during COVID, establishing it. So Senator Craig's question, you see lines, that owner should have looked to the proof, which is provided under lines 18 through 24 in terms of showing the receipts, literally, for the furlough, the lack of pay, in order to qualify for that. And so, we anticipated all those actualities. It's important. Unfortunately, our Commonwealth has a huge impact to when those across the river can't act on budgets, and our Virginians pay the price. And I know this is something familiar to the industry, having dealt with this so many times over the last decade at this point. So I appreciate the senator's work on this.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Rome had a question, I believe.
So, Mr. Chair, I do have a question, but I'm going to state it as a speaking to the bill because it's not for the patron so much. I know we've got 9 votes on this side for it, but given that it has an emergency clause, it doesn't need supermajority to get out of committee, but it would need on the floor. Can we just kind of get like a thumbs up if we've got enough to sustain that on the floor? Or if we don't, are we going to have to strip the emergency clause?
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that?
Senator Rouse.
It's been my understanding that you cross those bridges once you get there. The first step is to make sure we get it out of committee on the floor. We have passed this in previous years with bipartisan support, and it's my hope and aim that we'll be able to do the same once it reaches the floor.
Okay, it's been suggested you might want to consider amending the emergency
But
clause out. But
if we
it's up to
amend the
you.
emergency clause out of it, then the federal shutdown happens in March. So the federal workers won't be protected.
Okay, so you want to keep it in. Okay. So let's take testimony briefly. Are there those in opposition to this bill, the substitute at SB 1430, which would give a 60-day stay of proceeding to either federal employees who've been furloughed or I guess contractors who've been furloughed? Yeah. Are there anyone opposed?
Position, please raise your hand.
Anyone in support who wants to weigh in or give a thumbs up or something?
Those online in support, please raise your hand.
Thumbs up.
Okay. So let's, unless there's anyone online, we'll proceed to vote on reporting SB 1430, the substitute.
Ayes 9, no 6.
Okay, that bill does report. Thank you, Senator Rouse. Was it Senator Jordan who had another bill?
Yes, I'll be brief, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I have Senate Bill 1344. It's in regards to the Virginia Housing Trust Fund. My intention of the bill was to slightly adjust the ratios. Currently, it's an 80-20 ratio. The intent was to take it down to 65-35 with flexibility to handle some of the homelessness population in Virginia and get some more funding to our nonprofits. But I've talked with some stakeholders on this. I really want us to look at this issue in depth a little bit further to figure out how that flexibility works a little bit better and how we can probably address this issue more holistically. So with that, I would ask if it would be the will of the chair, if we could pass this bill by indefinitely with a letter to the Housing Commission to look into it.
Okay. So the motion is to PBI SB 1344 with a letter to the Housing Committee asking them to review the bill and consider those options. Okay. Then we will proceed to vote on the board.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Then, let's see. I think did I have a bill in here on COYA? Okay. Senator McPike, I'm going to turn it over to you while I present from memory a simple bill. Yes.
All right, Senator Eben.
Okay, we'll come
Senate
back.
Bill 1357.
Okay, so 1357 is dealing with the Conflict of Interest and Act. And it basically says that if your spouse is involved in a transaction that you do have a conflict of interest. This came from the COYA Commission. There was an initial staff determination that you did not necessarily have a conflict of interest. Spouse was involved, And the members of the committee differed with that recommendation and suggested that we clarify the law to make that clear. And I'm just looking for the language. I don't see the line, but it should be.
Under the personal interest in a transaction
Oh,
definition.
line 217. When the subject of is the spouse of a legislator or a member of your immediate family was already in there, that it is a conflict of interest. Are there questions for me, Mr. Chair?
Any questions of the patron? Stuart, any other follow-up? This is adopted and endorsed language from the process.
Chairman, Senator Evans has accurately described what the bill does. This is actually an official recommendation of the Ethics Council. It's one of those rare situations, doesn't happen often, but occasionally you can be in a position where the fact pattern presented to us was a spouse was going to vote for their spouse to be on a board, but it was a voluntary board, so there was no personal interest, no money, no financial benefit or gain. So under current COIL laws, it's not technically a personal interest in a transaction. You could do it. You didn't even have to tell people that you had that it's my spouse. The Ethics Council felt this was not appropriate, and in these circumstances, it should be treated like any other transaction where you do have a personal interest. You might be permitted to participate. You might not under current laws, but it's just making clear that you are deemed de facto to have a personal interest if it's your spouse that you are appointing to a board.
Great, thank you very much. Is there any opposition to Senate Bill 1357? Is it, there's a motion?
Well,
There's a motion and a second to report 1357.
I just have a question.
Well,
Clerk will,
let's
hold on.
ask Mr.
Senator Rouse.
Not to delay this committee any longer, but this bill is not about monetary gain. Is that where you're just explaining?
Yes, normally if you, yes, Mr. Chair, yes, Senator, normally if there's some kind of a financial gain, you would have a personal interest and you would say, I can't do this. I'd love to hire my spouse, but I can't officially make that vote because it's putting money in my family's pocket. These are the rare situations where it's like a volunteer board, so you don't have that trigger. Now you would.
Yeah, it's essentially using your government position to, I don't know, make a lot of money. We tend to not like that in Virginia. I don't know about other places. There's a motion to report Senate Bill 1357. Clerk will call the roll.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Thank you for adeptly handling that, Senator McPike. Okay, so Senator von Valkenburg has a bill on addictive feeds.
Is it a substitute or amendments?
Now, did we pass this bill last year?
Real quick, there's a substitute, and it does, so I'll move the substitute and then explain it. It's very straightforward.
Okay, so the substitute, the vote is on whether or not to adopt the substitute offered. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, these are two technical amendments. One offered by the Attorney General of changing operator to controller or processor. And then the other is adding the COPPA, which was also a JCOTS recommendation, adding the COPPA parental consent requirement. And so otherwise, those are both technical changes, I think. Otherwise, this is a bill we passed 40-0 last year in the Senate. It's about banning addictive feeds for minors, which is where you just, the online social media feed keeps going. I can go into more detail if you want, but this was the bill that passed 40-0 last year.
But first, we have to ask those who are compelled to weigh in against to briefly tell us if they have what their issues are with the bill.
Those online, raise your hand.
Welcome.
Good evening, Chairman Evan and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. My name is Jennifer Hanley. I'm the North American Head of Safety Policy at Meta. I'm also an Arlington, Virginia mom of two. I'm here to speak in opposition to SB 854, but I want to begin by emphasizing that we share the same goal, making the online environment safer for teens. At Meta, we're deeply committed to the safety and well-being of young people, and we've developed over 50 tools, features, and resources to help teens and families have age-appropriate and more positive experiences on our apps. This includes Instagram teen accounts. That has built-in protections to notify teens to leave the app after 60 minutes of daily use. It includes sleep mode, which is turned on between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., and it mutes notifications overnight and sends automatic replies to messages. We also default teens into our sensitive content control, and we recently announced additional steps we're testing to include features that let people reset their recommendations on Instagram. Requiring non-personalized feeds could actually result in teens being exposed to less appropriate or irrelevant content. Additionally, the vague language in the bill could extend consent requirements to things like comments, events, and other features. There are also First Amendment challenges on a similar bill in California right now. A 13-year-old in Richmond has really different interests and needs than a 17-year-old in New York City or Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example. Requiring parental consent feed by feed and app by app when teens use up to 40 different apps, in a week is a really unreasonable burden on parents. We think that any legislative approach that requires age assurance or parental consent should be at the App Store level to reduce the burden on parents and ensure teens are placed in age-appropriate experiences across all of the apps that they use. We look forward to working together to create solutions to balance safety and still provide teens with meaningful online experiences.
Okay, thank you. Others come forward, and if you could be succinct with your issues with the bill.
Good afternoon, or should I say good evening. Thank you for having me here. My name is David McGarry. I am the research director at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, and I am also a resident of Alexandria, Virginia. Specifically, I have concerns with this bill because it would de facto require online age verification, forcing children and their parents to offer up sensitive personal data to online platforms. Given the age verification software now commercially available, the privacy and data security dangers that attend age verification cannot be dismissed. Obviously, endangering the privacy and data security of Virginia's children cuts directly against the intentions of SB 854's advocates. SB 854 would also violate the First Amendment rights of adult users forced to submit to age verification as a precondition to accessing constitutionally protected speech online. Courts have ruled time and time again that age verification mandates, both implicit and explicit, are unconstitutional. This case law goes back for decades, goes up to the Supreme Court, and includes cases in California, Texas, and Arkansas. And I would note that yesterday, the Ninth Circuit in California enjoined such a statute. As a taxpayer advocate and as a Virginia taxpayer myself, I urge you to reconsider passing a bill that would inevitably require substantial public funding for its legal offense and would just as inevitably run straight into an injunction. As Virginia lawmakers work to ensure the safety and happiness of their constituents, they must remain aware of the limits placed on their authorities by the First and 14th Amendment. And once again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I welcome further conversations with your offices to provide more information.
Thank you. Okay, come forward. Welcome.
Hope Ledford again with Chamber of Progress in respectful opposition to SB 854. We applaud the efforts of this bill. However, we are concerned, as the folks mentioned earlier, that it could limit platforms' ability to downrank harmful content for kids. And we are also concerned about the age verification requirements that raises many privacy concerns with third-party verifiers, which introduces cybersecurity and data breaches, or cybersecurity risk and data breaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Good afternoon, Elizabeth Rafferty with the Northern Virginia Technology Council. And just briefly, while it's well-intentioned, this does raise serious concerns around constitutional rights, clarity, enforceability, and potential unintended consequences. We ask that you look for an alternative way to address the harms that we all recognize are created in the digital environment we have.
We have a question for you from Senator Reeves.
I have a question for the patron.
Oh, we'll come back to that. Okay, come forward, please.
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Lamar on behalf of the Richmond Technology Council. Respectfully, I'll just associate comments with Ms. Rafferty, and we're opposed to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and online we have and someone who's not a lobbyist or not a registered lobbyist, you can begin and you have 30 seconds.
You may begin.
Hi, thank you very much. Once again, Patrick Hedger, resident of Fairfax County in Northern Virginia and Director of Policy at NetChoice. NetChoice is opposed to SB 854. First and foremost, NetChoice just yesterday obtained an injunction against California's version of this legislation in the Ninth Circuit. Please see NetChoice v. Monza for more details on that. NetChoice argued that California's law violates the First Amendment, impacting both the rights of users of all ages to access lawful content without handing over sensitive information, and the expressive rights of platforms to organize and disseminate information.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Senator Van Valkenburg, how do you verify the age to make sure that this is just applying to those under 18 is your intent?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. With the substitute that we adopted, you'll note that it says controllers and processors that comply with the verifiable parental consent requirements of COP Children's Act shall be deemed compliant with any obligation to obtain parental consent under this chapter. Right, so fitting under the federal law.
But COPPA applies to those under...
Right, but following that definition, that process will... Yep.
But those are under 14.
Right, but following that will...
And it says that they shall use commercially reasonable methods to determine the user is not a minor. Do we have an idea what that is?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, it's kind of funny because they get up here and they claim they can't find who minors are, and then they'll tell you that they're trying to find out who minors are when they tell you all the safety measures they're using. And so, there's a bunch of different ways they go about it. Some are AI, right? Some are when they see, if somebody does post, somebody does create an account that they say they're 19 and they post something about their 16th birthday, right? Instagram will take down that account, right? Stuff like that. So there's a lot of methods that they can use and do use to track minors.
Okay, I've got Senator Rum in the queue and then Senator Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, will the witness from Meta please resume the microphone for question? All right, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the witness that what I heard the witness say was that Meta had a goal of, quote, making the internet safer for kids. And at the same time, right now, I'm looking at a January 7th, 2025 headline from the New York Times that says, quote, Meta drops rules protecting LGBTQ community as part of content moderation overhaul. How is that possibly consistent with making the internet safer for kids when that very change is going to lead to bullying of LGBTQ kids online?
We're deeply committed to trying to ensure that people are having a safe and positive experience, especially our youngest users. The changes that were announced in early January don't impact our highest severity harm, so I want to make sure that that's clear. Things related to child safety, suicide and self-injury, eating disorder content, that type of stuff has not changed. We still do have in place our bullying and harassment policies. We also have tools. So I mentioned earlier Instagram teen accounts. As part of those tools, we have something called hidden words now on automatically by default for teens. So that will filter out certain words that can be used to bully and harass them. We also still do have like reporting and other policies that may apply depending on what's happening on the platform.
Mr. Chair, follow-up question. Last question. Based on exactly what I just heard here, we also had that Meta post with LGBTQ plus hashtags were, quote, hidden from any users who had their sensitive content filter turned on. Teenagers have the sensitive content filter turned on by default.
Senator Rome, this bill's about addictive feeds. Is this relevant?
This goes into the feed part here, right?
Okay.
Because it controls what these kids are able to see in the first place. And the very concerns that we were hearing from the tech folks earlier with the senator from Roanoke's bill was supposed to be about LGBTQ kids having access to resources, right? And what I'm seeing here is an intentional effort to make an online space harder for these kids to actually exist in the first place.
I actually want to say, part of why we're opposed to this bill is because we would not be able to recommend and personalize content on our platforms. What I was saying about a teen enrichment being a certain age or having certain interests, we wouldn't be able to serve them content related to their interests without their parental consent as this is developed right now. We'd have to develop some kind of alternative feed, maybe with like trending topics across the country. So it would be what applies to like an average teen instead of that specific teen. So I wanted to make sure that's clear. The sensitive content control issue was, my understanding, a technical problem related to sexually suggestive content. It was addressed addressed once it was identified and remedied. I can get additional information, but I do understand that there was a mistake with the way the system was working at the time.
I'll save any further comments for later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator Reeves.
Senator Van Valkenburg, I think you said in your testimony earlier that the Attorney General's looked at your bill.
Yeah, we've been working with the Attorney General for 2 years on the bill. Yes, sir.
So, follow up, Mr. Chairman. So has the Attorney General given any thought to the litigation that he may face from the other people that were talking earlier? Did he have any concerns about defending your legislation in lieu of what we've heard earlier?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I would say they have not, the office has not brought that up. The office has asked, the changes they asked for were to help them enforce the law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that, I have a motion.
Senator Reeves.
I would move to report the bill.
Okay.
The substitute.
There's a motion and a second to report the substitute, which does not have a fiscal impact. So the motion is to report. We've heard our testimony. Did we hear from? Yeah, both sides. Please indicate your position on the voting board.
Ayes 15, no 0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
I want to give the floor to Senator Pillion on 1477.
Can you put the timer on?
Mr. I'm looking forward to his presentation, and I don't want you to feel like you have to rush.
Not at all.
No worries, Mr. Chairman.
This is a serious bill.
It is, Mr. Chairman, and there is a substitute.
Okay. Okay, the substitute has been moved and seconded. All in favor of adopting it would signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
All right, Mr. Chairman, before you is Senate Bill 1477. Hurricane Helene caused widespread damage in Southwest Virginia, leaving 310,000 people without power at its peak and causing significant damage to infrastructure and critical services. The storm brought high winds and heavy rainfall, which resulted in extensive damage to roads, bridges, water systems, and utility infrastructure, like many of the storms that have happened in your districts. While emergency response efforts, including the deployment of swiftwater rescue teams, helicopter operations, and debris removal crews, were swift and effective, and I'm very thankful for our first responders, the recovery process has revealed critical gaps in disaster funding. I could go on and tell you all the other things that had happened with the storm and all the impacts that it had, but I don't have to, because I'm thankful that each of you reached out to me during the storm and offered not only the money from your districts, you asked me where to donate, how your friends could donate, how other people could come and help. Many of you traveled down, and many of you sitting on this committee traveled down, toured the area, volunteered, and offered your help, and I can't thank you enough. So this bill creates the Disaster Assistance Fund, and it establishes an ongoing disaster assistance fund in the state treasury to address unmet disaster-related needs, providing funding for life, safety, and housing costs not covered by the federal aid, the private donations, or the insurance. It allocates money from Virginia's participation in the last Reggie auction, which was December 2023, to fund the disaster recovery efforts. Throughout Virginia, requires approval from the General Assembly and oversight by the Coordinator of Emergency Management for all the fund disbursements. It enables access to federal funds for disaster relief where a locality or state must match as much as 25% of the project cost for disaster relief. And it retains unused funds and accrued interest in the fund for future disasters, ensuring consistent resource availability, not just for this disaster, but also for the ones that could happen in your districts. If approved, these agencies would then deploy capital through grants and loans to states and to localities for approved rebuilding and resiliency projects. Portions of this federal funding come with the requirement that both a state and locality must match us up, like I've said, up to 25% of the project. And the creation of this important vehicle would allow the Commonwealth to provide that state match requirement and support localities by providing access to a funding line with the required local match as well. Although federal disaster declarations and private donations have provided substantial relief, gaps remain for addressing critical life safety and housing costs that fall outside the scope of federal aid or insurance coverage. These challenges emphasize the need for a dedicated state-level fund to address unmet disaster-related needs and support recovery efforts. And that's the bill.
Thank you, Senator Pillion. I appreciate the goal of this legislation and appreciate your wanting to see that we can do a better job in responding to disasters, whether in the Southwest or elsewhere. I think we all support disaster relief for Virginia citizens. I've been pleased to see FEMA delivering assistance, and I hope they'll continue to do so. But I did want to note, this bill takes money from RGGI proceeds, which had been earmarked in the code for pre-disaster resilience planning and projects to try and prevent weather damage and low-income energy efficiency, which saves ratepayers substantial money. Further, I have to review the substitute again, but when I review the original bill about the definition of a disaster and oversight provisions and details about the establishment of the fund indicate this requires some additional work. I know that there are some discussions ongoing now in the money committees, or at least in Senate Finance, about how we can support and supplement disaster recovery. So I just want to make those comments. And then I think that Senator Reeves had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to ask Senator Pillion, how much money, do you happen to know the number that was in the RGGI fund when they sold, like how much is that?
The remaining balance is $102 million.
Wow, okay. That's my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, Senator Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll have a motion, speak to that motion, appropriate time.
Please.
All right, so my motion will be to very gently have a PBI for the bill. And speaking to it, so number one, I just want to say, I drove down to Damascus and I actually met with the senator in Abington. I was happy to donate while I was down there and everything too. And I mean, when you go through town and you just see people's homes washed into a river, you know, it's so sad. I think it was at the Clinch. Was it the Clinch that it was? It was horrible. Just saw down there. At the same time, you know, based on what the chairman was just saying about, we're going to have something that's going to deal with this in the budget. Budget's probably the right vehicle for it, because I think it's probably the most apolitical vehicle for it. We know after the Floyd County case that happened back in the fall, that even though the governor's administration lost the case, they did say that they would vow to appeal it. And so I think this is going to be, you know, issues dealing with RGGI, I think are going to be tied up in court for a good while. And because of that, I think it's probably best that we find a different source that's not going to be RGGI related.
A second, we'll proceed to vote on that motion. Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't take public comment. Are there those who've been waiting to testify on this particular bill?
Mr. Chair, to correct myself, it was the Creeper Trail, not the Clinch.
What?
It was the Creeper Trail, not the Clinch. Sorry, I had misspoken earlier.
Okay. Was anyone waiting to testify online?
Those online, raise your hand.
Okay. Then we can open the roll.
Ayes 9, no 6.
I want to thank the senator again for his efforts and
Thank you, Mr.
appreciate.
Chairman, and thank the committee for their responsiveness.
Thank you.
Yep.
With that, I want to thank the audience for being so patient and making sure we don't reconsider your bills. Thank you. The committee is adjourned. Okay.
The Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.